Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Have you ever driven on Highway 1 at night? I mean, really at night, when the fog rolls in from the Pacific and every curve feels like it's pulling you toward the edge of the cliff? Most people don't do that. They tell you it's very dangerous, very dark, easy to miss a curve, and that you'll end up as a statistic scattered across the rocks 130 meters below. Some of us have no other choice. Some of us work the night shift in Monterey and live in Big Sur because that's all we can afford. Some of us have been using that road for so long that fear is nothing more than background noise. It's like your brain tuning out the sound of your own breathing. I'm Isla Moreno, and I've been driving on this coastal highway for 7 years. For 7 years, I've watched the sun set over the Pacific, counted the same worn guardrails, and known exactly which curves narrow and which open up enough to let you breathe. I work as a night watchman at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. While tourists imagine the jellyfish they saw that day, I clean the tanks and mop the floors. The pay is terrible, but the silence suits me. It always has. The drive home, that suits me too. Used to. It was March 15th when everything changed. I remember because it was the day after my 32nd birthday, and I'd spent it alone, wiping down glass exhibits and watching a giant Pacific octopus press its suckers against the viewing wall like it was trying to tell me something. The building had been empty for hours by the time I clocked out at 11:47 p.m. My supervisor, Gene, waved goodbye from his office, barely looking up from his phone. He was watching basketball highlights or something equally mundane. I remember thinking how nice it must be to have your biggest worry be whether the Warriors would make the playoffs. The parking lot was quiet. Just my beat-up 2004 Honda Civic sitting under a broken streetlight that flickered every few seconds like a dying heartbeat. The fog hadn't rolled in yet, but I could smell it coming. That thick, salt-heavy scent that coats the back of your throat and makes everything feel damp, even when it isn't. I threw my bag in the passenger seat, cranked the heat up high, and pulled out onto Highway 1 heading south. For the first 20 minutes, everything was exactly as it always was. The road curved and dipped, following the coastline in that serpentine way that makes your stomach drop if you think about it too long. Occasionally, another car would pass going north, headlights briefly illuminating the inside of my car before vanishing back into the darkness. The ocean was invisible on my right, but I could hear it, that low, constant rumble of waves hitting rocks that had been there for millions of years and would be there for millions more. I had my music on low, some podcast about unsolved mysteries that I wasn't really listening to. The host was talking about disappearances in national parks, how hundreds of people vanish every year under circumstances that make no sense. People found miles from where they went missing, barefoot and confused. People who were expert hikers suddenly losing all sense of direction. I turned it off. The last thing I needed was more anxiety fuel for a drive I was already approaching with caution due to the encroaching fog. Just past Garrapatta State Park, the fog hit. One moment, the road was clear. The next, it was like driving through wet cotton. Visibility dropped to maybe 30 feet, then 20, then less. I slowed down, gripping the steering wheel tighter, my high beams doing more harm than good by bouncing the light back at me. This was normal, frustrating, but normal. The fog did this all the time along this stretch. You just had to crawl along at 20 miles per hour and trust that the road would keep existing in front of you. But then I saw the car. It was parked on the shoulder, right at one of the wider turnouts that dot the highway for tourists who want to stop and take pictures of the coast. The kind of spot that during the day is filled with rental cars and families taking selfies with the ocean backdrop. But at night, nobody stops there at night. Nobody sane anyway. The car was a dark sedan, maybe a Toyota or Honda, something common that wouldn't stand out in any other context. But here, now, with its engine clearly running and its brake lights glowing red in the fog, it stood out like a scream. I slowed down even more, my foot hovering over the brake pedal as I approached. Through the rear window, I could make out the silhouette of a single person in the driver's seat. They weren't moving, not checking their phone, not adjusting their mirrors, not doing any of the normal things people do when they pull over. Just sitting there, perfectly still, facing the ocean that neither of us could see through the fog. I should have kept driving. Every instinct I had told me to keep driving. But something about that stillness bothered me in a way I couldn't articulate. It was too perfect, too deliberate. Like a mannequin posed in a car for some art installation about loneliness. I pulled up alongside them, leaving about 10 feet between our vehicles, and rolled down my passenger window. The fog immediately rushed in, cold and wet, carrying that salt smell even stronger now. "Hey," I called out. "You okay?" Nothing. The figure didn't turn, didn't acknowledge me at all, just kept staring straight ahead at the gray wall of fog. "Hey," I tried again, louder this time. "Do you need help?" Still nothing. My heart was starting to beat faster now. That primal warning system that evolution gave us finally kicking in to say that something was wrong here, something was very wrong, and I needed to leave immediately. But I didn't. Because just as I was about to roll up my window and drive away, the person's head turned. Slowly, mechanically, like a security camera rotating on its mount. And even though I couldn't make out any features through the fog and the dark and the distance between us, I could feel them looking at me. Not just looking, studying, analyzing, the same way that octopus had pressed against the glass earlier, like it was trying to understand what I was through sheer force of observation. "Are you okay?" I asked again, my voice smaller now, less certain. The figure didn't respond, didn't wave, didn't nod, didn't do anything human. Just kept that head rotated in my direction for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. Then, just as slowly, they turned back to face the ocean. That's when I saw it. The light. At first I thought it was a boat. Maybe a fishing vessel out past the fog, its spotlight sweeping the water. But it wasn't moving like a boat. It wasn't moving at all. It was just there, hanging in the fog maybe a quarter mile out over the ocean. A single point of brilliant white light, perfectly stationary like someone had taken a star and nailed it to the sky. I turned off my headlights. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I wanted to see the light more clearly. Maybe some part of my brain thought that by turning off my lights I could somehow make myself invisible to whatever was out there. But the moment my lights clicked off, something changed. The light over the ocean, that fixed, unmoving point, began to descend. Not falling, not dropping, but descending with that same mechanical deliberateness that the person in the car had shown when they turned their head. Smooth, controlled, inevitable. It moved down through the layers of fog, and as it descended, I realized it wasn't just a light. There was something behind it, something that distorted the fog in a way that hurt to look at, like trying to focus on a shape that your brain refuses to process correctly. Circular, but not quite. Solid, but somehow translucent. There, but not there. The light descended until it reached the water, or at least where I thought the water was. I couldn't actually see the ocean through the fog, but I knew it was there, could hear the waves still crashing against the rocks. The moment the light touched the water, it went out. Not gradually, not fading, just gone. like someone flipping a switch, and the moment it went out, the wind stopped. You need to understand something about the California coast. The wind never stops, never. It might calm down, might drop to a breeze, but it's always there, always pushing in from the Pacific, always carrying that salt smell and the sound of the ocean with it. It's as fundamental to that landscape as the rocks and the water and the fog. But now, nothing. Complete stillness. The kind of silence that feels physical, that presses against your eardrums and makes you aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing, the tiny sounds your body makes just existing. Even the ocean seemed to have gone quiet, the waves no longer crashing but merely lapping. Gentle. Wrong. I looked back at the car next to me. The figure was still there, still sitting perfectly still, but now I could see something else. Their hands. Both hands were pressed flat against the steering wheel in what should have been a white-knuckle grip, except their knuckles weren't white. They were just there, pressed against the wheel with no tension, no stress, like someone had posed them and forgotten to make it look natural. What the hell? I whispered to myself, and my voice sounded too loud in the unnatural quiet. I needed to leave. Everything in my body was screaming at me to leave, to start my car and drive away as fast as the fog would allow, to put distance between myself and whatever was happening here. But my hand wouldn't move to turn the key. My foot wouldn't press the gas. I was frozen, caught between terror and a fascination that felt alien, like it wasn't really my own emotion but something being broadcast into my head from somewhere else. That's when the figure in the car spoke, or at least I think they spoke. Their lips didn't move. At least I don't think they did. It was hard to tell in the dark. But I heard words, or the impression of words, the feeling of words. It's hard to explain. It was like someone describing a conversation you had in a dream, where you know what was said, but you can't quite remember the actual words. They're watching. That's what came through. Not heard, not spoken, but known. They're watching. Who's watching? What's watching? Watching what? I finally managed to move my hand to the ignition. Managed to turn the key and hear my engine sputter to life with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the stillness. Managed to shift into drive and press the gas pedal with a foot that felt like it belonged to someone else. As I pulled away, I looked in my rearview mirror. The car was still there, that figure still posed behind the wheel, hands still pressed against the steering wheel in that unsettling way. But now I could see that the fog around their car was moving differently than the fog around everything else. It was rotating, slowly spiraling around the vehicle like water circling a drain. And in the center of that spiral, just barely visible in the red glow of their brake lights, was something else. A shape, tall, thin, standing directly behind the car, just at the edge where the fog was thickest. I pressed the gas harder, and the shape vanished into the fog. Or maybe it had never been there at all. Maybe my brain was just filling in the gaps, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. That's what I told myself as I drove. That's what I kept repeating as the fog finally began to thin, as the wind picked back up, as the world slowly returned to something that felt normal. By the time I reached my turnoff into Big Sur, my hands had stopped shaking. My heartbeat had returned to something close to normal. The podcast had somehow turned itself back on, the host now talking about cattle mutilations in the Midwest. I turned it off again and drove the last few miles in silence. My house is nothing special, a small rental cottage tucked back in the redwoods, far enough from the highway that you can't hear the traffic, but close enough that the commute doesn't kill me. I pulled into my gravel driveway, turned off my car, and just sat there for a moment, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. Through the windshield I could see my porch light, yellow and warm and normal, moths circling it like they always did. Everything exactly as it should be. I grabbed my bag and got out, and that's when I noticed my neighbor's dog wasn't barking. Miles Rowan lived 3 houses down, and his German shepherd, Bear, barked at everything. Raccoons, deer, falling leaves, his own shadow. That dog was a one-animal neighborhood watch program. But now, nothing. Just silence, broken only by the wind moving through the redwoods and the distant, ever-present sound of the ocean. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, flipped on every light switch I passed, made a cup of tea I didn't drink, took a shower that lasted 45 minutes, changed into pajamas and sat on my couch, staring at the TV without turning it on. They're watching. Those words, that feeling of words, kept circling my mind. Who's watching? The person in the car? The light over the ocean? Something else, and why? Why there? Why then? Why did I happen to drive past at that exact moment? I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure with their hands pressed against the steering wheel. Saw that light descending through the fog. Saw that shape standing behind the car, tall and thin and impossible. When dawn finally came, I was still sitting on my couch, my cold tea on the table beside me, my eyes burning from exhaustion. I told myself I'd imagined it. Told myself the fog and the late hour and the general creepiness of that stretch of highway had combined to create a hallucination, a waking dream brought on by too many long nights and not enough sleep. I almost believed it, but then my phone buzzed. A text from my supervisor, Gene. "Did you see the news? Car found abandoned on Highway 1 near Garapata. Driver missing. Police asking if anyone saw anything suspicious last night." My hands started shaking again. I opened my browser, searched for news about Highway 1, about missing drivers, about anything that might confirm what Gene had said, and there it was. A small article on the Monterey Herald website, published 2 hours ago. Vehicle found abandoned on Highway 1. Driver missing. Monterey County Sheriff's deputies are investigating after a vehicle was found abandoned at a scenic pullout near Garapata State Park early this morning. The vehicle, a 2018 Honda Accord, was discovered at approximately 6:15 a.m. by a passing motorist. The engine was still running, and the driver's door was open. The driver, identified as 34-year-old Marcus Brooks of Carmel, has not been located. Deputies noted that Brooks's wallet, phone, and keys were all found inside the vehicle. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Monterey County Sheriff's Office. I read the article 3 times. Then I read it again. Then I clicked through to the comments section, where people were already speculating. Suicide, most suggested. Depression. Financial troubles. The usual explanations people reach for when reality does something that doesn't fit their understanding of how the world works. But I knew better. I'd seen Marcus Brooks, or at least I'd seen what used to be Marcus Brooks, sitting perfectly still with his hands pressed against the steering wheel, staring at something in the fog that I couldn't quite see. I'd felt whatever was watching through him. I'd seen that light descend from the sky and touch the water. They're watching. I should have called the police. Should have told them what I saw, given them my statement, done my civic duty. But what would I say? That I saw a man sitting in his car? That there was a light in the fog? That I had a feeling something was wrong? They'd write it down, sure, but they wouldn't believe it. They'd nod and smile and thank me for my time, and then they'd go right back to searching for Marcus Brooks along the coastline, assuming he'd jumped or wandered off or done any of the normal things that missing people do. They wouldn't look up. They wouldn't wonder what that light was, or what it wanted, or why it chose Marcus Brooks to what? Study? Collect? Take? I needed to know more, needed to understand what I'd seen. So I did what any rational person would do in my situation. I went online, started searching for similar stories, similar sightings, similar anything that might help me make sense of what happened. Big Sur UFO sightings, Pacific Coast lights, Highway 1 disappearances, California coastal anomalies. The search results went on for pages, decades of reports, hundreds of witness accounts, all describing variations of the same thing. Lights over the ocean, silent crafts hovering above the fog. People stopping their cars and then not remembering why. Time moving differently. The wind stopping. Animals going quiet. And disappearances. So many disappearances. People last seen on Highway 1, their cars found abandoned at scenic pullouts. Doors open, engines running, no sign of struggle or foul play. Just gone. I found forums dedicated to tracking these incidents, amateur investigators comparing notes and theories. Most of it was the usual conspiracy theory nonsense, secret government experiments, interdimensional portals, ancient alien bases hidden in underwater caves. But buried in all that noise were details that matched what I'd experienced. The stillness, the feeling of being watched, the sense that the fog itself was somehow alive, somehow aware. One post caught my attention. It was from 2019, written by someone calling themselves Coastwatcher 91. I drive Highway 1 every night for work. I've been doing it for 12 years. In that time, I've seen the lights maybe 20 times. Always in the same spots: Garrapata, Hurricane Point, Julia Pfeiffer Burns. Always between midnight and 4 a.m. Always when the fog is thick. The first time I saw one, I stopped. Got out of my car to get a better look. That's when I felt it. Like something reaching into my head, rummaging around, looking for something specific. I got back in my car and drove away as fast as I could. Now, when I see the lights, I keep driving. I don't slow down, I don't stop, I don't even look too hard. Because I think if you pay too much attention, if you show too much interest, they notice you, and you don't want them to notice you. The post had 127 replies, most from people sharing their own experiences or calling the poster crazy. But one reply stood out. It was from just 3 months ago. My brother stopped for the lights. He called me from his car, said there was something in the fog, something beautiful that he needed to get closer to. I told him to drive away. I begged him to drive away. He said, "They're watching," and then the line went dead. They found his car the next morning at Garrapata. Doors locked, keys in the ignition, phone on the passenger seat with our call still open. He's been missing for 90 days. The police say he probably wandered off and fell. I know he didn't. I know something took him. Because I heard it in his voice, he wasn't scared. He was happy, peaceful, like he'd found something he'd been looking for his whole life. Garrapata. The same place. The same pullout where I'd seen Marcus Brooks sitting in his car. The same spot where he'd been staring at that descending light. I spent the entire day reading, going deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole of Pacific coastal phenomena, UFO sightings, missing persons cases. The more I read, the more the pattern became clear. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. Something was operating along that stretch of coastline, had been for decades, maybe longer. And whatever it was selecting people. Carefully, deliberately. By the time evening rolled around, I'd made a decision. I was calling in sick to work. No way was I driving Highway 1 tonight. No way was I putting myself back on that road where something might be waiting, might be watching for me to come back. I texted Gene with some excuse about food poisoning. He didn't ask questions, just told me to feel better and that he'd cover my shift. The relief I felt was immediate and overwhelming. One night off. One night safe in my house with the doors locked and the lights on. One night to figure out what to do next, except I couldn't figure it out. Every plan I considered seemed insane. Go to the police and tell them what? That I saw lights in the fog and now I think aliens are abducting people from Highway 1. They'd smile politely and usher me out. Go to the media? Even worse. I'd become that crazy woman who thinks she saw a UFO, a joke for late-night talk show hosts. Tell my friends? I didn't really have friends, not close ones anyway. The isolation that had seemed like a blessing when I took this job now felt like a trap. So I did nothing. I stayed in my house, watching the daylight fade outside my windows, watching the shadows of the redwoods grow longer and darker. My phone buzzed occasionally. Jean checking in, a spam call about my car's extended warranty, a notification that my Netflix payment had processed. Normal things, mundane things, the kind of things that reminded me the world was still spinning, still functioning, even though my personal corner of it had gone completely insane. Around 8 p.m. there was a knock at my door. I nearly jumped out of my skin. My heart rate spiked instantly, my mind immediately going to that tall, thin shape I'd seen in the fog. But that was ridiculous. Whatever was out there didn't knock on doors, didn't need to. If it wanted me, it would just take me. I crept to the door, peeked through the peephole. It was Miles Rowan, my neighbor. I exhaled with relief and opened the door. Miles was in his early 50s, retired from the Coast Guard, living alone except for Bear, his German Shepherd. He was a good neighbor, quiet, kept to himself, occasionally dropped by with surplus vegetables from his garden or to warn me when the power company was doing maintenance. We weren't friends exactly, but we had that comfortable relationship that neighbors develop when they respect each other's boundaries. "Hey, Isla," he said, and something about his voice was off, strained. "You got a minute?" "Sure, come in." He shook his head. "Rather talk out here, if that's okay." That's when I noticed he was holding Bear's leash, and Bear was pressed against his leg, not pulling or exploring like dogs usually do. The shepherd's ears were flat against his head, and he kept looking past me, into my house, like something in there was making him nervous. "What's up?" I asked, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. Miles glanced around like he was checking if anyone else was nearby. "You drive to work last night?" My stomach dropped. "Yeah, why? See anything unusual? On the highway?" I studied his face. He looked tired, older than I remembered. Dark circles under his eyes, his skin pale, even in the yellow glow of my porch light. "Why are you asking?" I said carefully. He ran a hand through his graying hair. "Bear won't stop acting weird. Started last night around midnight. Barking at the sky, something he never does. Not at passing planes or birds or anything, just the sky. When I tried to take him outside this morning, he wouldn't leave the porch. Planted his feet and refused to move. Took me 20 minutes to coax him into the yard, and even then he wouldn't leave my side." I looked down at Bear. The dog was trembling slightly, his eyes still fixed on something I couldn't see. "Animals sense things we can't," Miles continued. "I learned that in the Coast Guard. Dogs especially. They can detect changes in air pressure, electromagnetic fields, stuff we don't have the equipment for. Whatever Bear's sensing, it's got him spooked bad. And he's not the only one. I called the Hendersons up the road. Their cats won't come out from under the bed. The Morales family says their chickens stopped laying. Even the deer aren't coming down from the hills." "Miles," I said slowly, "what do you think is happening?" He looked at me for a long moment. "I think you saw something last night. And I think whatever you saw is still here." My hands were shaking now. I shoved them in my pockets. I saw a car. A guy pulled over at Garrapada. He was just sitting there. Then there was a light over the ocean. Miles nodded like this wasn't surprising. The lights have been reported for years, decades. I saw them myself a few times when I was with the Coast Guard, doing night patrols. We called them the Sentinels. Nobody knew what they were. Other ships, drones, reflections from offshore drilling platforms. But they'd show up in the same spots, always at night, always in the fog. And sometimes, when they appeared, we'd lose radio contact, just static, like something was interfering with the signal. What do you think they are? He shrugged, above my pay grade, but I'll tell you what I told my crew back then. If you see them, you keep moving. You don't investigate. You don't get curious. You just keep going and pretend you didn't see anything. The guy in the car, I said. Marcus Brooks. He went missing. They found his car this morning. Miles's jaw tightened. I know. I heard. And I'm willing to bet he's not the first and won't be the last. So what do? We stay inside. We wait it out. Whatever's happening, it'll move on eventually. It always does. I wanted to believe him, wanted to think that if I just stayed in my house with the doors locked and the lights on, I'd be safe. But something about his theory bothered me. You said it always moves on, I said. How often does this happen? Miles hesitated. Every few years, there's a spike. More sightings, more reports. Then it quiets down for a while. We're in a spike right now, has been building for the past few months. And people just accept this? They don't try to figure out what's causing it. Some people try. They usually end up looking like fools, or worse. He paused. There was a guy a few years back, marine biologist from the aquarium where you work, actually. Got obsessed with the lights. Started taking readings, measurements, trying to predict when and where they'd appear. He'd drive up and down Highway 1 every night with all kinds of equipment. Then one night he didn't come home. They found his car at Hurricane Point. All his equipment was there, still running, still collecting data, but he was gone. What happened to the data? Far as I know, the police took it. Probably sitting in an evidence locker somewhere, never looked at. I thought about that. About all the data, all the evidence, all the witness accounts sitting in files and lockers and databases, never analyzed, never connected. How many people had seen what I saw? How many had reported it only to be dismissed? I need to show you something, I said, pulling out my phone. I opened the article about Marcus Brooks. This is the guy I saw last night. This is where I saw him. Miles read the article, his expression darkening. You need to tell the police. Tell them what? That I saw a light? They'll think I'm crazy. You saw him alive. That makes you the last person to see him before he disappeared. That's important information. He was right, of course. But the thought of walking into a police station and trying to explain what I'd witnessed made my skin crawl. How would I describe the stillness? The feeling of being watched. The way Marcus Brooks's hands were positioned on the steering wheel like someone had posed them. I'll think about it, I said. Miles studied me for a moment, then nodded. Your choice. But if you drive Highway 1 again, be careful. And if you see those lights, don't stop. Don't slow down. Just keep driving. After he left, I went back inside and locked the door. Bear's behavior bothered me almost as much as everything else. Animals knowing something was wrong before humans did. That was documented, scientific fact. Earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions. Animals could sense them coming. So what was Bear sensing? What was still out there? I opened my laptop and went back to the forums. Started posting my own account, asking if anyone else had experienced something similar recently. Within minutes, replies started coming in. I saw lights off Point Lobos 3 nights ago. Thought they were fishing boats until they started moving in formation. My grandmother lives in Big Sur. She says the lights have been really active this year, sees them almost every night from her porch. Whatever they are, they're getting bolder. Used to only see them way offshore. Now they're coming in closer to the coast. One reply gave me pause. It was from someone with the username Highway Watcher, and was posted just minutes after I submitted my account. "You're not safe. They're looking for you now. They know you saw. You need to leave Big Sur. Tonight." I stared at the message. There was no way this person could know who I was or where I lived. I'd been careful not to include identifying details in my post, but something about the urgency in the message made my heart rate spike. I clicked on their profile. It was empty. No posts, no history, no information except that the account had been created today. Just for this message. Just to warn me. My phone buzzed. Jean again. "Hey, feeling better? Need you tomorrow night if possible." Jeff called in sick too. I stared at the message. Tomorrow night meant driving Highway 1 again. Meant passing Garapata. Meant being on that dark, empty road where something was watching. I typed back. "Still pretty rough. Might need one more day." His reply came quickly. "Okay, but need you Friday at latest. Already short-staffed." Friday. That gave me 2 more nights. 2 more nights to figure out what to do, to decide if I was going to quit my job, move away from Big Sur, leave this coast entirely. 2 more nights to convince myself that I'd imagined everything, that it had all been a stress-induced hallucination brought on by too many late-night drives and not enough sleep. But I knew I hadn't imagined it. I knew what I'd seen was real, and more than that, I knew that whatever had taken Marcus Brooks was still out there, still watching, still waiting. I spent that night like I'd spent the previous one, awake, lights on, jumping at every sound. The wind in the redwoods sounded like whispers. The settling of the house sounded like footsteps. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed threatening, like it was calling to something outside, letting it know I was here, alone, vulnerable. Around 3 a.m., Bear started barking. I could hear him through the walls, frantic, terrified barking that went on and on. Then, abruptly, it stopped. Not tapered off, just stopped, like someone had hit a mute button. I grabbed my phone, pulled up Miles's number. My thumb hovered over the call button. But what would I say? What could he do? The silence stretched on. No more barking. No sounds at all except the wind and the distant ocean. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Look outside." My blood turned to ice. I stared at the message, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Who was this? How did they have my number? Another text. "Look outside. They're here." I should have ignored it. Should have called 911, called Miles, called someone. But instead, I found myself walking to my living room window, the one that faced the driveway. My hand reached for the curtain, pulled it aside just an inch. The driveway was empty. My car sat where I'd left it, looking perfectly normal in the glow of the porch light. The redwoods swayed gently in the breeze. Everything looked exactly as it should. Then I looked up. Above the trees, maybe 100 feet up, was a light. Not bright, not like a spotlight or a searchlight. Just a steady glow, like someone had hung a paper lantern in the sky. It wasn't moving, wasn't blinking, just floating there, silent and still. As I watched, another light appeared beside it. Then another, then 3 more. Within seconds, there were dozens of them spread out across the sky above my property, forming a rough circle. They didn't move, didn't pulse, just hung there, watching. My phone buzzed again. The same unknown number. They know you saw. They're deciding what to do with you. I dropped the curtain, backed away from the window. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen. Not to regular people, not to night custodians who just wanted to drive home after work and sleep in their own beds. But it was happening. Those lights were real. That message was real. And somewhere out there, in the fog and the dark and the spaces between the redwoods, something was making a decision about my future. I ran to my bedroom, grabbed my car keys, threw some clothes in a bag. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care. Anywhere was better than here, alone, with those lights hovering overhead. I'd drive to Monterey, check into a motel, figure things out in the daylight when the world made sense again. But when I opened my front door, I stopped. Miles was standing in my driveway. Bear was beside him, but the dog wasn't barking, wasn't moving, just standing there perfectly still, staring at me with the eyes that reflected the porch light in a way that didn't look quite right. "Miles?" I called out. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer, didn't move. Just stood there with his hands at his sides, his face blank, his eyes locked on mine. "Miles, we need to get out of here. There are lights. They're watching," he said. And his voice was wrong. Too flat, too emotionless. The same way those words had felt when they'd come from Marcus Brooks' car. I took a step back. "Miles, what's wrong with you?" He smiled. It wasn't his smile. Wasn't a human smile. It was too wide, too perfect, like someone had told a machine what a smile was and the machine had done its best to replicate it. "They want to meet you," he said. "They're very interested in you." I slammed the door, locked it, backed away. My phone was buzzing constantly now. Text after text from that unknown number, each one saying the same thing. "Come outside." The lights in my house started flickering. My laptop screen glitched, showing static. The TV turned on by itself, displaying nothing but white noise. Every electronic device I owned was going haywire. Screens flashing. Speakers emitting high-pitched whines that made my teeth hurt. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The flickering ceased. The screens went dark. The sounds cut off. Even the wind outside seemed to stop, leaving that same unnatural stillness I'd experienced on Highway 1. My front door started to glow. Not from the porch light, that was off now. This light came from somewhere else, seeping through the cracks around the doorframe, through the keyhole, through the peephole. Soft and golden and somehow alive. I heard footsteps on my porch. Slow, measured, deliberate. Not Miles's footsteps. These were lighter, softer, like someone walking on air. A voice in my head, not heard, but felt, like those words from the highway. "Isla Moreno, we need to talk." I don't remember deciding to open the door. One moment I was standing in my living room, paralyzed with terror. The next I was turning the doorknob, pulling the door open, stepping out onto my porch. It was like watching myself from outside my body, like I was a passenger in my own skin. Miles was gone. Bear was gone. The lights above the trees were gone. Everything was gone except the fog, which had somehow found its way up from the coast, winding through the redwoods in thick tendrils that moved against the wind, or rather, moved in the absence of wind, because the air was perfectly still. Standing at the edge of my porch, just beyond the reach of the light, was a figure. It was tall, maybe 6.5 feet, and thin in a way that didn't look human, not emaciated, just differently proportioned. Longer limbs, narrower torso, a head that was slightly too large and too smooth. It wore something that might have been clothing, a dark, form-fitting suit that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. I couldn't make out features clearly in the fog and darkness, but I could see its eyes. Large, dark eyes that didn't blink, that looked at me with an intelligence that was unmistakably not human. "Don't be afraid." The voice came again, not from the figure but from somewhere inside my own mind. "We're not here to harm you. What do you want?" My voice came out as a whisper. "To understand. To learn. To correct an error." "What error?" The figure tilted its head in a gesture that was almost bird-like. "You weren't supposed to see. Marcus Brooks wasn't supposed to have company. His selection was carefully planned, his route monitored. But you came early. You stopped. You looked. I was trying to help him. We know. Your intent was compassionate. But your presence complicated the process. We had to abort the collection. Marcus Brooks is confused now, damaged. We cannot complete what we started. He will need to be returned." "Returned? He's missing. Where is he?" The figure gestured vaguely upward. "Nearby, safe. We've been studying his neural patterns, trying to understand why humans stop their vehicles at scenic points. Why they stare at the ocean, why they feel compelled to witness beauty even when it's dangerous. It's an interesting behavior. Inefficient, but poetic." "You're studying us? Like we're lab rats? Like you're fascinating. Your species has such potential, but you waste so much of it. You live such short lives, yet you spend them in fear. Fear of the dark. Fear of the unknown. Fear of each other. We're trying to understand why. By abducting people. By observing. By collecting data. Sometimes that requires direct examination, yes. But we always return them, always. Every human we've studied has gone back to their lives. That marine biologist from a few years ago, the one who disappeared at Hurricane Point. Did you return him?" A pause, the figure's head tilted the other way. "That was unfortunate. His neural patterns were incompatible with our return process. He saw too much, understood too much. We had to integrate him differently. You killed him. We preserved him. There's a difference." I felt sick. My legs were shaking, but I couldn't run. Some part of my brain was still functioning, still processing, still trying to understand what was happening. "Why are you telling me this? Why come here?" "Because you need to understand. You need to stop looking. Stop investigating. Stop trying to make sense of what you saw. Humans who ask too many questions become complications, and complications must be resolved. Is that a threat? It's a warning. We like you, Isla Moreno. Your neural patterns are interesting. Strong curiosity, high intelligence, deep empathy. You would make an excellent study subject. But if you continue down this path, if you keep searching for answers, we'll have no choice but to collect you. And unlike Marcus Brooks, we won't abort the process." The fog was getting thicker now, closing in around my porch, obscuring the redwoods. I could barely see my car anymore, just a vague shape in the driveway. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "How long have you been watching us? Your species measures time differently than we do, but if we translate to your understanding, thousands of years. We've been here since your ancestors first learned to stand upright. We've watched you grow, watched you evolve, watched you spread across this planet. You're our oldest study, our most successful long-term observation. We're not yours to study. Everything is ours to study. That's our purpose. We observe, we learn, we document. We've done this on thousands of worlds, with thousands of species. You're not special, you're just persistent. No matter how many times we think we understand you, you surprise us." Another figure emerged from the fog, shorter than the first, moving with that same fluid grace. Then another. then 3 more. Within moments, I was surrounded by them, these tall, thin beings with their 2 large heads and their dark, unblinking eyes. I should have been terrified, should have been screaming, running, fighting, but that ability seemed to have been taken from me. All I could do was stand there and listen. Marcus Brooks will be returned tomorrow, the first figure continued. He'll wake up in his car at Garapata, confused but unharmed. He'll tell police he doesn't remember anything. They'll assume he had a medical event, a seizure or a stroke. His life will continue. And me? You have a choice. You can forget what you saw, we can help with that. Remove the memories, smooth over the trauma. You'll wake up tomorrow thinking last night was a bad dream. You'll drive Highway 1 again, go to work, live your life. Safe, normal, ignorant. Or you remember, you keep these memories, keep this knowledge, but you stop looking, stop investigating. Accept that there are things in this universe that humans aren't meant to understand yet. Live with the knowledge, but don't pursue it. Why would you let me keep my memories? The figure moved closer, and now I could see more details. Its skin was smooth, almost luminescent, with a faint pattern of lines that might have been veins, or might have been something else entirely. Its face was mostly featureless, just those enormous eyes, a small slit of a mouth, tiny holes where a nose should be. Because we're curious about what you'll do, how you'll process this information, whether you'll tell others or keep silent, whether knowledge will break you or make you stronger. You interest us, Isla Moreno. We want to see how your story unfolds. You're experimenting on me right now. Everything is an experiment. The fog was so thick now that I couldn't see beyond my porch. The whole world had been reduced to this small space, this moment, these beings standing in a circle around me. If I choose to remember, I said slowly, and I break my end of the deal, if I keep investigating, keep trying to understand, what happens? We collect you, permanently. You become part of our research. You'll never see Earth again, never see another human. You'll spend the rest of your existence in observation, studied, documented, preserved. It's not a painful fate, but it's not freedom either. And if I choose to forget, you wake up tomorrow, you go to work, you drive Highway 1 and feel nothing when you pass Garapata. The fear fades, the questions fade, you become normal again. I thought about that, about going back to who I was 3 days ago, when my biggest worry was whether I'd remembered to defrost chicken for dinner, about losing these memories, this knowledge, this terrifying but undeniable proof that we're not alone in the universe. Part of me wanted that, wanted the blissful ignorance, the peace of not knowing, but another part, the part that had always asked questions, always pushed boundaries, always wanted to understand, recoiled at the idea of having my memories stolen, my experiences erased. I want to remember, I said. The figures seemed to shift, their postures changing subtly. You're certain. The knowledge will burden you. You'll lie awake at night wondering if we're watching. You'll see lights in the sky and freeze with fear. You'll question every strange experience, every lost moment of time. The world will never feel safe again. I don't want to forget. Very well. The first figure raised one long-fingered hand and touched my forehead. The contact was cold, electric, sending a jolt through my entire nervous system. Images flooded my mind, not mine, but theirs. I saw their world, or what might have been their world, though the concepts were so alien that my brain struggled to process them. I saw other worlds, other species, other collections. I saw the scope of their operation, the sheer scale of it. Thousands of years, thousands of planets, Millions of beings studied and documented and preserved. I saw Marcus Brooks, suspended in some kind of chamber, lights playing across his unconscious face, while devices I couldn't understand scanned his brain. I saw the moment they'd decided to abort, the moment they'd realized I was there, watching, complicating their carefully planned procedure. I saw others like me, humans throughout history who'd seen too much, known too much, been given the same choice. Some had chosen to forget, others had chosen to remember, and a few, a very few, had broken the deal and been collected. Then the hand pulled away, and I was back on my porch, gasping for air, my head spinning. "You have your answer," the figure said. "Marcus Brooks will be returned. You will stop investigating, and we will continue our work. This is the agreement." "Why me?" I asked, still dizzy. "Why did this happen to me?" Random chance. Wrong place, wrong time. Or perhaps right place, right time. We don't believe in coincidence the way you do. Perhaps you were meant to see. Perhaps your story serves a purpose in the larger pattern. We don't know yet. That's why we watch. The fog began to thin. The figures started to fade back into it, their forms becoming indistinct, then transparent, then gone. "Drive safely, Isla Moreno," came that final thought voice. "Highway 1 is dangerous at night. So many curves. So many places where a moment of distraction could be fatal. It would be unfortunate if you had an accident." Then they were gone. The fog was gone. The stillness was gone. I was alone on my porch, the normal night sounds of Big Sur returning, wind in the trees, distant ocean, an owl hooting somewhere in the darkness. My phone buzzed, a text from Miles. "Sorry about earlier. Had the weirdest dizzy spell. Bear and I just woke up on the driveway. You okay?" I texted back, "I'm fine. Get some rest." Inside my house, everything was normal. The lights worked. The TV showed regular programming. My laptop displayed my browser, still open to those forums where I'd been reading about Highway 1 disappearances. I closed the laptop, deleted my posts, cleared my browser history. Whatever I'd learned tonight, whatever I'd seen, I was keeping it to myself. That was the deal. The next day, the news reported that Marcus Brooks had been found. He'd walked out of the woods near Garrapatta State Park, confused and dehydrated but unharmed. He told police he didn't remember anything after pulling over to check his phone. The doctor said it was probably a seizure or some kind of dissociative episode. They wanted to do more tests, but he'd made a full recovery. Case closed. I went back to work that Friday. The drive down Highway 1 was exactly as it had always been. Dark, winding, peaceful in its own way. When I passed Garrapatta, I felt a flutter in my chest, a whisper of memory, but I kept my eyes on the road and my hands on the wheel. Jean asked if I was feeling better. I said yes. Jeff had recovered from his illness too, whatever it had been. Everything was back to normal, except it wasn't. Not really. Because now I knew. I knew that when I saw lights in the fog, they weren't fishing boats or planes or reflections. I knew that when the wind stopped and the animals went quiet, something was near. I knew that every person who went missing on this coast, every unexplained disappearance, every he must have jumped or she must have wandered off, some of them were taken, studied, documented, sometimes returned, sometimes not. And I knew that I was living on borrowed time, that my memories were a gift and a curse, that one wrong move, one too many questions, one moment of weakness where I tried to tell someone what I'd seen, and I'd be gone, collected, preserved. The hardest part isn't the fear. I've learned to live with fear. It's become background noise, just another thing my brain processes and moves past. The hardest part is the isolation. Having knowledge I can't share, experiences I can't discuss, questions I can't ask. Sometimes, when I'm driving Highway 1 late at night, I'll see other cars pulled over at those scenic turnouts. And I'll wonder, are they just tourists taking pictures? Or are they like Marcus Brooks was, sitting perfectly still, hands on the wheel, staring at something in the fog that most people can't see? I don't stop to check. I keep driving, that's the deal. But I notice things now that I never noticed before. The way the fog sometimes moves against the wind. The way lights over the ocean sometimes hover too steadily to be boats. The way certain stretches of highway feel different at night, charged with something I don't have a name for. And I notice the people, the ones at the aquarium who stare too long at the exhibits, like they're trying to remember something just out of reach. The customers at the grocery store who move through the aisles in a daze, their eyes unfocused. The neighbors who suddenly seem different, their speech patterns slightly off, their reactions just a beat too slow. How many of them made the same deal I did? How many chose to remember? And how many forgot, their memories smoothed over, their trauma erased, their experiences filed away in some vast database light years from here? I'll never know. That's part of the deal, too. It's been 6 months now since that night on my porch. 6 months of driving Highway 1, going to work, living my life. 6 months of watching the sky and wondering if they're watching back. 6 months of carrying this knowledge like a stone in my chest, heavy and cold and impossible to put down. Last week, there was another disappearance. A woman this time. Car found abandoned at Hurricane Point. Doors locked, keys in the ignition. The police are investigating. The news is calling it suspicious. Her family is pleading for information. I could tell them what I know, could explain about the lights, the stillness, the figures in the fog, could give them closure or at least understanding. But I won't, because that's not the deal. The deal is silence. The deal is that I keep living, keep working, keep driving Highway 1 like nothing ever happened. The deal is that I become a keeper of secrets, a holder of knowledge that can never be shared. And some nights when the fog is particularly thick and the wind dies down to nothing, I stand on my porch and look up at the sky. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, I see them. The lights, silent, steady, watching. They're up there right now. Even if you can't see them, they're always up there, always watching, always studying. Always collecting data on the strange, inefficient, fascinating species that builds their homes along dangerous coastal highways and stops at scenic overlooks just to watch the sunset over an ocean that's been here for billions of years and will be here for billions more. And we never think to look up. We never think to ask who else might be watching the same sunset, might be wondering the same things about us that we wonder about them. But I know. I look up, I see them. And I remember the deal. So I go back inside, lock my door, turn on every light in my house. I make tea I won't drink and watch TV shows I don't really see. And when my alarm goes off at 10 p.m., telling me it's time to get ready for work, I put on my custodian uniform and grab my keys and walk out to my car. I sit in the driver's seat. I adjust my mirrors. I start the engine. And then I pull out of my driveway and head north toward Monterey, toward the aquarium, toward another night shift of mopping floors and cleaning glass, while marine creatures swim in peaceful ignorance above my head. The drive is dark. The curves are sharp. The ocean is invisible beyond the guardrails. And somewhere in the fog, in the spaces between the lighthouse beams, in the quiet moments when the wind stops and the world holds its breath, they're there. Standing over Big Sur. Standing over all of us. Watching. Always watching. And I drive on, because that's the deal. That's the price of knowing. That's what it means to be human in a universe far stranger and far older than we ever imagined. I drive on, and I don't stop. And I never look too long at the lights in the fog, because I want to keep remembering, and I want to keep living. And those two things I've learned are very rarely compatible when you know what I know. You ever been out on the water when the fog rolls in so thick you can't tell where the ocean ends and the sky begins? When the world shrinks down to nothing but the sound of waves slapping against your hull and the cold, wet air pressing against your face. Most recreational boaters won't go out in conditions like that. Too dangerous, they say. Too easy to lose your bearings, to drift off course, to end up smashed against rocks you never saw coming. But when you're a commercial fisherman working the waters off Mendocino, you don't get to choose your weather. The fish don't care if it's foggy. The bills don't stop coming because visibility is poor. So you go out and you trust your equipment, and you hope your GPS doesn't fail you when you need it most. I'm Connor Blake, and I've been fishing these waters for 15 years. Started when I was 19, working as deckhand on my uncle's boat. Bought my own vessel when I was 25, a 32-foot commercial fishing boat I named the Rusalka, after some Russian water spirit my ex-girlfriend used to tell stories about. It's not much to look at, but it's mine. Paid for with my own money, earned one crab trap at a time. I know every inch of that boat, every sound the engine makes, every quirk and problem. And I know these waters like I know the scars on my hands, where the good spots are, where the currents run strong, where the rocks hide just beneath the surface waiting to tear open your hull if you're not careful. Mendocino isn't like the Southern California coast. We don't have sandy beaches and surfers and beach volleyball. We have rocky cliffs and cold water and fog that rolls in like a living thing. The town itself is small, maybe 900 people year-round, though that swells in summer when tourists come up from San Francisco to browse the art galleries and stay in bed and breakfasts that cost more per night than I make in a week. But come winter, it's just us locals again. The fishermen, the shop owners, the people who've lived here for generations and can't imagine being anywhere else. This story starts on November 3rd. I remember the date because it was my sister's birthday, and I'd promised to be back in time for dinner at her place. She was turning 37 and making a big deal about it. Kept saying she was officially closer to 40 than 30 and needed her family around for moral support. I'd planned to check my pots early, be back at the dock by 4, plenty of time to shower and change and show up with the expensive wine she liked. But plans are just wishes you write down, and the ocean doesn't care about your sister's birthday. I left the harbor at 3:30 a.m., which was normal for me. The forecast had called for fog, but that was also normal for November. What wasn't normal was how thick it came in, how fast. By the time I reached my first string of pots about 6 miles out, I couldn't see more than 20 feet in any direction. The GPS said I was in the right spot, but without visual confirmation of the buoys marking my traps, I had to rely entirely on the coordinates. I found the first buoy after 10 minutes of searching, pulled up the trap. 3 decent-sized Dungeness crabs, legal size, worth keeping. I rebaited the trap, tossed it back, marked it off on my chart. 23 more pots to check. At this rate, I'd be done by 9, back at the dock by 10. Still plenty of time for my sister's dinner. The next few pots were about the same. A couple of crabs each, nothing spectacular but steady work. By 6:30 a.m., I'd checked 15 pots and had maybe 40 pounds of crab in my hold. Not a great haul, but decent enough. The fog was getting thicker, if that was possible. My radar showed nothing around me, no other boats, no obstacles. Just me and the Rusalka and the invisible ocean. That's when things started feeling wrong. I can't explain it better than that. Just wrong. Like when you walk into your house and know immediately that something's different even though you can't see what. The air felt heavier, colder. The sound of the waves changed, became muffled, like someone had wrapped the world in cotton. Even the engine sounded different. Still running fine, but distant somehow, like I was hearing it through a wall. I checked my instruments. Everything read normal. GPS working, radar working, compass showing the right heading. But that feeling wouldn't go away. I pulled out my phone, thought about calling the harbor master to see if any weather warnings had been issued. No signal. That wasn't unusual this far out, but it added to the general sense of unease creeping up my spine. I decided to check one more pot, then head in. Sister's dinner or not, I wasn't comfortable being out here anymore. Something about the fog was different today, wrong in a way I couldn't articulate but definitely felt. I found my next buoy and started pulling up the trap. It came up heavy, really heavy. My first thought was that I'd snagged something, maybe caught the line on a rock or some debris, but the line was coming up clean, just heavier than it should be. When the trap finally broke the surface, I saw why. It was full, not just full of crabs, but packed with them, writhing over each other, dozens of them when the trap should only hold maybe 5 or 6. And they were all legal size, all keepers. In 15 years of fishing, I'd never seen anything like it. It was like every crab in the area had decided to pile into this one trap. I should have been excited. This was the kind of catch that pays the bills for a month. But instead, I felt that wrongness intensify. The crabs weren't moving right. They were sluggish, almost lethargic, not snapping their claws the way they normally would. And when I looked closer, I could see their eyes. Those little black stalks were all pointing in the same direction. All of them, every single crab, oriented the same way like they were watching something. I looked where the crabs were looking. Saw nothing but fog. Then I saw the lights. 3 of them, hovering about 50 yards off my port side, maybe 15 feet above the water. They weren't bright, not like spotlights or flares. Just soft, pale glows, like someone had hung paper lanterns in the fog. They weren't moving, weren't bobbing with the waves, just hanging there perfectly still in a triangular formation. My first thought was another boat, but I checked my radar. Nothing. And no boat would show lights like that, 3 separate sources in formation. Navigation lights are regulated, specific colors in specific positions. These were just glowing. Pale yellow-white, like old parchment lit from within. I watched them for maybe 30 seconds. They didn't move, didn't pulse, didn't do anything. Just floated there in the fog, silent and still. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the muffled quiet. "Anyone there?" No response. Not that I expected one. But what else do you do when you see something that doesn't make sense? You try to make it make sense. You call out, you look for explanations. You tell yourself it's just other fishermen or the Coast Guard or something mundane and inexplicable. I reached for my spotlight, aimed it at the lights. The beam cut through the fog, illuminating the water, the air. But when it reached where the light should be, nothing. The glows were still there, but my spotlight passed right through them like they were projections, not physical objects. And here's the thing that made my hands start shaking. They weren't reflecting on the water. The ocean surface was calm, should have been showing their reflection like a mirror. But there was nothing. The lights existed, but they cast no reflection, no shadow, nothing. That's when I noticed the crabs had gone completely still. Every single one in the trap had stopped moving. Not dead. I could see their gills still working, see their eyes still tracking, but motionless, like they'd been frozen in place. "What the hell?" I whispered, and my breath came out visible in the suddenly freezing air. The temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees in the last minute. I could see my breath, see frost forming on the metal rails of my boat. In November, off the California coast, in 50-degree water. That shouldn't be possible. The lights began to move. Not quickly, not erratically, but with slow, deliberate purpose. They maintained their triangular formation, moving as one unit, gliding parallel to my boat. No sound, no engine noise, no propeller wash, no disturbance in the water. Just silent movement through the fog. I should have started my engine. Should have gotten the hell out of there. But I was frozen, watching those impossible lights glide through the fog like ghosts. They passed along my port side, maybe 40 yards out now, still maintaining that perfect formation. As they moved, I noticed something else. The fog around them was moving differently than the rest of the fog. It was swirling, spiraling inward toward the lights like water circling a drain. Then they stopped, directly off my bow, about 60 yards out. The triangular formation held 3 points of pale light hanging in the freezing fog. And I felt something. Not heard, not saw. Felt. Like a pressure in my head, behind my eyes. A presence that was aware of me, examining me, deciding something about me. My radio crackled. Static at first, then something else. Not words, not exactly, but patterns in the static that almost sounded like words. Like someone speaking a language made of white noise and electromagnetic interference. Connor Blake. I spun toward the radio. The voice, if you could call it that, had come through perfectly clear, cutting through the static. My name, spoken in a voice that sounded human but wasn't, too flat, too perfect. No breath sounds, no accent, no warmth. Connor Blake, it said again. You see us. My hand was shaking as I reached for the radio mic. Who? What are you? The static intensified, then cleared. We are observers. We are collectors. We are here to understand. Understand what? Why you harvest. Why you remove life from the water. What purpose it serves. I looked down at the trap full of crabs, all still frozen in place, all still watching the lights with their black stalk eyes. I'm a fisherman, I said, and my voice cracked. This is my job. This is how I make a living. You take life to sustain life, the voice said. It wasn't asking, just stating. This is inefficient. This causes suffering. They're crabs. They're food. This is how nature works. Nature is being observed. Nature is being documented. You are part of nature. Therefore, you are being observed. The lights began moving again, this time coming closer. The temperature dropped even further. I could see ice forming on my windshield now, spreading in crystalline patterns like frost on a window. Wait, I said. Stay back. Don't come any closer. The lights stopped. The voice came through the radio again. You're afraid. Why? Because I don't know what you are. Because this isn't normal. Because I want to go home. A pause. The static on the radio pulsed like a heartbeat. You may go home, but you are marked now. You have seen. You are part of the documentation. What does that mean? Marked how? You will understand in time. Others will come. Others who need to know what you have seen. You will tell them. You will help them understand. I won't tell anyone. I'll keep this to myself. I just want to leave. You cannot keep this to yourself. The need to share will grow. The need to warn will consume you. This is how humans process trauma. We have studied many. We know. The lights began to rise, lifting slowly from their position above the water. As they ascended, the fog around them brightened, glowing with that same pale yellow-white light. The triangular formation held even as they climbed, rising higher and higher until they disappeared into the thick fog above. The moment they vanished, everything changed. The temperature returned to normal. The frost on my windshield melted in seconds. The crabs in the trap suddenly came alive again, snapping and crawling over each other like nothing had happened. The radio went silent, just the usual background hiss of an empty channel. I stood there for a long moment, my hand still gripping the radio mic, my heart hammering in my chest. Had that really happened? Had I really just talked to what? Aliens? Ghosts? Some kind of collective hallucination brought on by too much time alone on the water? I looked at the trap full of crabs. They were still all oriented in the same direction, still all pointing where the lights had been. That was real. That had happened. I needed to leave, needed to get back to harbor, back to land, back to people and normalcy and things that made sense. I dumped the crabs into my hold. All of them, too many to count, and tossed the trap back into the water without rebaiting it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the winch. I started the engine, set a course for Mendocino Harbor, and opened the throttle as much as I dared in the heavy fog. The GPS showed the way home. The radar showed nothing around me. Everything read normal. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that somewhere above me in the fog, those three lights were following, observing, documenting. The trip back took 90 minutes. 90 minutes of jumping at every sound, of checking the radar every 30 seconds, of praying that I wouldn't see those lights again. The fog didn't lift, just stayed thick and oppressive all the way to the harbor entrance. When I finally saw the breakwater appear through the mist, I nearly cried with relief. The familiar outlines of the harbor, the other boats tied up at their slips, the lights of the fuel dock, all of it looked like paradise. Normal, mundane, safe paradise. I tied up the Rusalka at my usual slip, killed the engine, and just sat there for a moment. My hands were still shaking. My heart was still racing. I felt like I'd aged 10 years in the last 2 hours. "Connor, you okay?" I looked up. Naomi Rusk was walking down the dock toward me. Naomi ran the harbor master's office, had been doing it for 12 years. She was in her early 40s, practical and no nonsense, the kind of person who could handle any crisis with calm efficiency. If anyone would believe what I'd seen, or at least not immediately call me crazy, it was her. "Yeah," I said, and my voice sounded hoarse. "Yeah, I'm okay. Just rough morning out there." She stopped at the edge of my slip, looked me over with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen plenty of fishermen come back from bad trips. "You look like hell. What happened?" I opened my mouth to tell her. Opened my mouth to say I saw lights in the fog, heard voices on the radio, watched the temperature drop 40 degrees in a minute. But the words wouldn't come. Every time I tried to form the sentence, my throat closed up. My mind went blank. "Just the fog," I finally managed. "Got disoriented for a bit. It's thicker than usual out there." She frowned. "You sure? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine. Just tired. Long morning." She didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "All right, but be careful out there. We've had some weird reports lately." That made me look up. Weird how? Other fishermen seeing things. Lights in the fog, equipment malfunctions, fish behaving strangely. Nothing concrete, just weird stuff. Coast Guard's been asking questions, but nobody knows what to make of it. When did this start? Maybe 3 weeks ago. Started small, just 1 or 2 reports, but it's been picking up. Had 5 different boats report unusual activity in the last week alone. 5 different boats. 5 other fishermen who'd seen what I saw, or at least something similar. Did any of them... Did they describe the lights? Naomi's frown deepened. Yeah, 3 pale lights in a triangle formation, moving against the wind, making no sound. How did you know that? Because I just saw them. Because they talked to me through my radio. Because they told me I was marked. That I'd been documented. That others would come. Lucky guess, I said instead. She studied me for a long moment. Connor, if you saw something out there, you need to report it. Coast Guard's taking this seriously. They think it might be smugglers or illegal fishing boats or something. It's not smugglers. How do you know? Because smugglers don't make the temperature drop 40 degrees. Because smugglers don't talk through your radio in voices that sound almost but not quite human. Because smugglers don't make crabs freeze in place while they watch with empty black eyes. Just a feeling, I said. Naomi sighed. Look, I know you fishermen like to keep your good spots secret. Don't want to report every little thing to the authorities. But this is different. People are spooked. If you saw something, anything, you should tell someone. I'll think about it. She didn't look satisfied with that answer, but she let it go. Get some rest. You look like you need it. After she left, I sat in my boat for another 20 minutes just staring at the water. The fog was starting to lift now, the sun burning through in patches. Everything looked normal. The harbor was busy with the usual morning activity. Boats coming and going, crews unloading their catches, tourists taking pictures of the quaint fishing village. But I knew what I'd seen, knew what I'd heard. And I knew that voice had been right. The need to tell someone was already growing, eating at me like acid. I wanted to grab Naomi, grab anyone, shake them, and make them understand that something was out there. Something that wasn't human. Something that was watching us, and studying us and documenting us like we were specimens in a lab. But I couldn't. Every time I tried to form the words, they died in my throat. I went home, forgot about my sister's birthday dinner, forgot about the wine I was supposed to bring, forgot about everything except those 3 pale lights hanging in the fog. My house is a small rental cottage about a mile from the harbor, tucked back in the woods where the tourists don't go. It's not much, 2 bedrooms, outdated kitchen, bathroom with plumbing that groans like a dying animal, but it's mine, and it's quiet. And right now, quiet was exactly what I needed. I took a shower, washing off the salt and the sweat and the bone-deep cold that hadn't quite left me, even though I'd been back on land for over an hour. The hot water felt good, normal, real. I stood under it for 20 minutes, letting the steam fill the bathroom, trying to convince myself that what I'd experienced was just some weird atmospheric phenomenon combined with exhaustion and too much time alone on the water. But I couldn't convince myself. The memory was too clear, too specific. Those lights, that voice, the crabs all frozen and watching. It had happened. Whatever it was, it had definitely happened. My phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from my sister. 1 voicemail, I didn't listen to it, didn't call her back. What would I say? Sorry I missed your birthday dinner, I was talking to aliens through my radio? I collapsed on my couch, turned on the TV just for the noise, for the comforting sound of human voices talking about human things. The local news was covering a story about the upcoming Thanksgiving parade. Then weather, more fog expected through the weekend. Then a brief mention that caught my attention. Coast Guard officials are asking fishermen to report any unusual activity off the Mendocino coast. Several vessels have reported equipment malfunctions and unexplained sightings in recent weeks. While authorities stress there's no danger to the public, they encourage boaters to remain vigilant and report anything out of the ordinary. Unexplained sightings, that's what they were calling it. Like it was nothing. Like it was just fishermen seeing things after too many hours on the water. But 5 boats in 1 week? That wasn't nothing. That was a pattern. I needed to know more. Needed to know if other people had heard that voice, felt that presence. Needed to know if I was the only one who'd been marked, whatever that meant. I grabbed my laptop, started searching. Mendocino Strange Lights Fog brought up dozens of results, most of them old tourist photos of the lighthouse or atmospheric phenomena articles. But buried in there were forum posts, Reddit threads, blog entries from locals describing exactly what I'd seen. One post from 2 weeks ago. Heading back from checking crab pots this morning, saw 3 lights in formation about half-mile out. Thought it was the Coast Guard at first, but no engine sound, no radio traffic. Lights just hovered there for maybe 5 minutes, then shot straight up into the fog and disappeared. Anyone else see this? Replies ranged from skeptical, probably flares, to conspiratorial, government is testing something, to helpful. I saw similar lights last month off Point Arena. Another post from 3 days ago. Whatever's out there is getting bolder. Saw the lights again this morning, closer this time. My fish finder went crazy, showing readings that made no sense. Like something massive was directly under my boat, but nothing was there when I looked. Radio picked up weird interference, almost sounded like voices, but couldn't make out words. Getting too spooked to go out alone anymore. The replies on that one were more serious. Other fishermen sharing similar experiences. Equipment malfunctions, strange readings, interference on radios and electronics. One person mentioned their dog wouldn't stop barking at the sky the previous night. Another said their chickens had stopped laying eggs 3 weeks ago. I kept reading, going deeper into the forums and comment sections. The pattern was clear. Something had been operating off the Mendocino coast for at least a month, maybe longer. The sightings were increasing in frequency and getting closer to shore. And, from what I could tell, I was the first person who'd actually communicated with whatever was out there. That voice on the radio, "You are marked now. Others will come." Others. Who were the others? More of those lights? Different entities? Or did it mean other humans? People who would seek me out because I'd been documented, because I'd become part of their research? My phone buzzed again. This time I looked at it. A text from Naomi. "Need to talk to you. Something came up. Can you meet me at the harbor office?" I stared at the text. It was already 4 p.m. The harbor office officially closed at 3, and Naomi was strict about her hours. If she was asking me to come now, something was wrong. I texted back, "What's going on?" Her reply came immediately. "Can't explain over text. Please come. It's important." I grabbed my keys and drove back to the harbor. The fog was rolling in again, earlier than usual. Thick tendrils creeping between the buildings and across the parking lot. The sun was already hidden, the world reduced to shades of gray, and the sound of foghorns from the offshore warning buoys. The harbor office was a small building near the fuel dock, blue paint peeling from the salt air, windows that looked out over the marina. Naomi's truck was the only vehicle in the lot. I parked next to it and headed inside. She was at her desk, but she wasn't alone. 2 men in Coast Guard uniforms sat across from her, and they all turned when I walked in. The tension in the room was immediate and obvious. "Connor," Naomi said, and her voice was strained. "These are Officers Martinez and Williams from the Coast Guard station at Fort Bragg. They want to ask you about this morning." Officer Martinez stood up, extended his hand. He was in his late 30s, Hispanic, with the kind of weather-worn face you get from years on the water. "Mr. Blake, thanks for coming. We're trying to get statements from everyone who's reported unusual activity recently." "I didn't report anything," I said carefully. "No, but Ms. Rusk mentioned you seemed shaken when you came in this morning. Said the fog had you disoriented. We're checking with all the boats that were out early today." I looked at Naomi. She gave me an apologetic shrug. "I'm fine," I said. Just tired. Long day. Officer Williams stood up now. He was younger, Asian, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Blake, we're not here to get anyone in trouble. We're trying to figure out what's happening out there. In the past month, we've had 23 reports of unusual activity off the Mendocino coast. Equipment failures, strange lights, electronic interference. 2 boats had to be towed in because their engines quit for no apparent reason. 3 fishermen have reported hearing voices on their radios that weren't coming from any registered frequency. 3 fishermen hearing voices. So I wasn't the only one. What kind of voices? I asked. Martinez and Williams exchanged a glance. That's classified, Martinez said. But we're concerned. This kind of activity, this frequency of incidents suggests something systematic is happening. Could be foreign vessels, could be underwater equipment interference, could be any number of things. But we need information from people who've actually encountered whatever this is. And you think I encountered something? Did you? Williams asked, and his eyes were locked on mine. I thought about that voice on the radio, about those 3 pale lights, about the crabs all frozen in place, watching, about the promise, or threat, that I was marked, that others would come. I saw lights, I said slowly, in the fog, 3 of them in a triangle formation. Both officers leaned forward. Naomi's eyes widened. When was this? Martinez asked. This morning, around 6:45 a.m., I was checking pots about 6 miles out. Can you describe the lights? Pale, yellow-white. Soft, like paper lanterns. They didn't reflect on the water. No sound, no engine noise. They moved in formation, stayed about 50 to 60 yards from my boat. Williams was taking notes. How long did you observe them? Maybe 5 minutes. Then they rose up into the fog and disappeared. Did they do anything else? Make any movements that seemed purposeful or directed at you? I hesitated. This was the moment. I could tell them about the voice, about the radio communication, about being marked. But something held me back. That feeling in my throat again, that inability to form the words. They just moved parallel to my boat for a bit, I said instead. Then they left. Martinez frowned. Your radio, did you experience any interference? Static, some weird patterns in the static, nothing clear. Another exchange of glances between the officers. Williams's pen stopped moving. Mr. Blake, Martinez said carefully, have you heard anything since then? Any unusual sounds? Any equipment malfunctions at home? Anything like that? No, why? Because 3 other witnesses who reported close encounters with the lights have experienced ongoing phenomena. Electronic devices acting strangely, unexplained sounds, sense of being watched. We're trying to determine if there's a pattern. Sense of being watched. I'd felt that all day, that prickling awareness of eyes on me even when I was alone. I'd written it off as paranoia, but what if it wasn't? I'm fine, I said. Just saw some lights, that's all. Martinez studied me for a long moment. All right, but if you experience anything else, anything at all, you call us immediately. He handed me a card with a phone number. That's my direct line, day or night. After they left, Naomi locked the door and turned to me. What the hell, Connor? You saw them? The lights everyone's talking about? I saw something. Doesn't mean it's what everyone else saw. 3 pale lights in a triangle formation, she said flatly. That's exactly what everyone else described. And the Coast Guard is taking it seriously enough to send officers around interviewing witnesses. This isn't nothing. I know. So, what else happened out there? I can tell you're not telling them everything. There's nothing else to tell. She crossed her arms. Bullshit. I've known you for 8 years, Connor. I know when you're hiding something. What happened? I wanted to tell her. Wanted to unload everything, the voice, the temperature drop, the feeling of being examined by something inhuman. But that blockage in my throat was worse now. Almost painful. Like my body physically refusing to form the words. The fog was thick, I said. I got disoriented, saw some lights, that's all. You're lying. I'm tired. I'm going home. Connor, leave it alone, Naomi. I left before she could push harder, before I broke down and tried to tell her everything. The drive home took 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. The fog was so thick now that I could barely see 20 feet ahead, had to crawl along at 15 miles per hour with my hazards on. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something wrong immediately. My porch light was on. I never left the porch light on during the day. Waste of electricity. But more than that, there were marks on my door. Long, streaking marks like something wet had been dragged across the wood. And at the base of the door, scattered on the porch, were clumps of something green and slimy. Seaweed. Fresh seaweed, still wet, still smelling of salt and ocean. I got out of my truck slowly, every nerve in my body screaming at me to get back in and drive away. But this was my house, my home. I wasn't going to be scared away from my own property by some seaweed. I walked up to the porch, knelt down to examine it closer. It wasn't just scattered randomly, it was arranged in a circle. A perfect circle, maybe 6 feet in diameter with my front door at the center. And in the middle of the circle, pressed into the wood of the porch, was a symbol I didn't recognize. 3 dots arranged in a triangle. My hands started shaking again. I pulled out my phone, started to dial Naomi's number, then stopped. What would I say? Someone left seaweed on my porch in a pattern? She'd think I was crazy. Hell, maybe I was crazy. Maybe this was all some elaborate stress-induced breakdown and none of it was real. But the seaweed was real. The symbol was real. And those marks on my door looked like they'd been made by something dragging itself up from the ocean and across my porch. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, immediately locked it behind me. The house felt different. Colder. The air had that same heavy quality it had on the boat when the lights appeared. Like the atmosphere was denser somehow, pressing down on me. "Hello?" I called out, feeling stupid even as I did it. But what else do you do when your house feels occupied by something you can't see? No response. Just the ticking of the kitchen clock and the hum of the refrigerator. I walked through each room, turning on every light, checking every closet and corner. Nothing. Everything looked normal, untouched, but that feeling persisted, that sense of being watched, of sharing space with something invisible. In my bedroom, I noticed my laptop was open. I'd closed it before I left, I was sure of it. Always did, force of habit. But now it was open, the screen dark, but the power light blinking to show it was on. I sat down at the desk, moved the mouse to wake it up. The screen illuminated, showing my browser. But it wasn't showing the pages I'd been looking at earlier. Something, had opened a new search. The search bar contained 3 words: Connor Blake marked. The results were loading. News articles, social media profiles, public records. Everything about me. Where I lived, where I worked, who my family was. My entire life laid out in search results, documented, cataloged. I slammed the laptop closed, backed away from the desk. My heart was racing, my breath coming in short gasps. This wasn't paranoia, this was real. Something had been in my house. Something had used my computer to research me, to learn about me. You are marked now. That voice on the radio, that promise. It hadn't been metaphorical. They, whoever or whatever they were, had literally marked me, tagged me somehow, made me part of their study, and now they were gathering data, learning everything about Connor Blake, the fisherman, the brother, the human specimen. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Don't be afraid. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to understand. I stared at the message, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Another text came through. The circle on your porch. It's a message. 3 points of observation. 3 witnesses. 3 chosen to help us understand. 3 chosen. 3 fishermen who'd had close encounters. 3 people marked and documented. Others will come to you, the next text read. 2 more who have seen. You will meet them. You will share your experiences. This is necessary for our research. I typed back with trembling fingers. Who are you? The response took a moment. We are watchers. We are recorders. We have observed your species for thousands of years. You call us many things. None of the names are correct. What do you want from me? To understand why you harvest the ocean, why you take life to sustain life, why you fear the water yet depend on it. You represent a pattern we have observed in coastal communities across your planet. Studying you helps us understand the larger pattern. I didn't agree to this. Agreement is not required. Observation is passive. Documentation is necessary. You will not be harmed. The seaweed on my porch. The circle. What does it mean? It means you are being watched. It means we are near. It means others will find you because they are searching for answers, and you have been marked as someone who has answers. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those 3 pale lights hovering in the fog. Every creak of the house settling made me jump. The shadows in the corners seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. And that sense of being watched never went away, just intensified as the hours crawled past midnight and into the early morning. Around 3 a.m., I heard something outside. Footsteps on gravel, slow and deliberate, circling my house. I grabbed a flashlight and my phone. No weapons, I've never owned a gun, and crept to the window. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see a figure standing at the edge of my driveway. It was a woman, maybe mid-30s, wearing a heavy jacket and jeans. She was staring at my porch, at the circle of seaweed, her face pale in the moonlight that filtered through the thinning fog. I watched her for a moment, trying to decide what to do. Then she looked up, directly at my window, like she knew I was there. She raised one hand in a hesitant wave. Against every instinct screaming at me to stay inside, I opened the front door. "Can I help you?" "Are you Connor Blake?" Her voice was hoarse, exhausted. "Who's asking?" "My name is Sarah Williams. I'm a marine biologist from Fort Bragg. I've been looking for you." Williams. Same last name as the Coast Guard officer who'd interviewed me. "Why?" "Because I saw the lights too, and I got a message. Told me to find 2 others who'd been marked. It gave me your name and this address." My stomach dropped. "Who gave you my name?" "I don't know. I woke up this morning and my laptop was open, showing a map with 3 locations marked. This address was one of them. A fishing boat slip at the harbor was another. And there was a message. Find them. Share what you know. Oh. 3 witnesses make the pattern complete. 3 witnesses. 3 points of observation. Just like the texts had said. "You should come inside," I said. She followed me in, her eyes immediately going to my laptop still closed on the desk. "Have you checked your computer recently?" Someone searched for information about me. Used my own laptop. Same here. Mine showed searches for my research, my publications, everything I've ever written about coastal marine biology. They're studying us the same way we study them. Them? Whatever's out there, those lights. I saw them 4 days ago while collecting samples off McCarricher State Park. They approached my research boat, stayed for maybe 10 minutes, then left. My equipment recorded everything, or at least tried to. The data is corrupted, full of artifacts and readings that make no sense. Water temperature fluctuations of 40 degrees in seconds, sonar showing massive objects that weren't there when I looked, and voices. I recorded voices on my hydrophone, speaking in patterns I've never heard before. Did the voices say anything you could understand? Just my name, over and over. Sarah Williams, Sarah Williams. Like they were confirming my identity, making sure they had the right person. I showed her the texts on my phone. She read them, her face going pale. They contacted you directly. That's more than I got. I just found the map. The message said 2 more who have seen, I said. You're one. Who's the other? I don't know. The 3rd location on the map was the harbor. That's why I came here first. I figured you might know who else has been marked. I thought about the Coast Guard interview, about the 3 other fishermen who'd heard voices. There are others who've had experiences, but I don't know which one is supposed to be the 3rd witness. Maybe they'll find us. The message said we needed to share what we know. Maybe once all 3 of us are together, we'll understand what they want. We sat in my living room, both of us exhausted and wired at the same time, comparing experiences. Sarah's encounter had been similar to mine. The lights, the cold, the sense of being examined. But she'd been alone on her research boat. No radio communication, just that feeling of presence and the corrupted data afterward. In my field, she said, we talk about observer effect. The idea that observing something changes it. Just by watching, by measuring, we alter what we're studying. But this is different. They're not just watching, they're interacting. Leaving messages, arranging meetings. That's not passive observation. So what are they doing? I think they're conducting an experiment. They've selected 3 people with different relationships to the ocean. A fisherman, a marine biologist, and presumably someone else. They're studying how we each interact with the marine environment, how we understand it. And by bringing us together, they're creating a situation where we share knowledge. They're seeing how humans process and communicate information about experiences that don't fit our understanding of reality. We're lab rats, more like participants in a study, but one where we never signed a consent form. Around 5 a.m., there was a knock at the door. We both jumped, then looked at each other. "The 3rd witness?" Sarah whispered. I got up, looked through the peephole. A man stood on my porch, early 50s, wearing a Harbor Patrol windbreaker. I recognized him, Tom Morrison, one of the volunteers who helped Naomi with harbor security. I opened the door. "Tom, what are you doing here?" "Got a message," he said, his voice shaking. "On my boat radio. Told me to come to this address. Said there were 2 others who'd seen what I saw. Said we needed to talk." The 3 points of the triangle. 3 witnesses brought together. Tom came inside, and we went through the same process, comparing experiences, sharing details. Tom had seen the lights 5 days ago while on patrol, checking boats in the outer marina. His encounter was briefer than ours, but he'd heard the same voice on his radio, the same flat, perfect pronunciation of his name. "I thought I was losing my mind," Tom said. "Been doing harbor patrol for 20 years, never seen anything like this. And then I start seeing the patterns. Seaweed arranged in circles, symbols marked on boat hulls, water that feels wrong even though it tests normal. It's like they're leaving calling cards letting us know they're here." "Why us?" Sarah asked. "Out of all the people on this coast, why select us specifically?" "Maybe we're not special," I said. "Maybe we're just convenient. We're all connected to the ocean. We're all in positions where we observe marine life regularly. We're data sources. Tom shook his head. No, it's more than that. I've been thinking about this since the message came. Each of us represents a different aspect of human relationship with the ocean. Connor harvests from it, takes life. Sarah studies it, seeks understanding. I protect it, enforce rules and conservation. We're three different approaches to the same resource. They're comparing how different humans interact with the ocean, trying to understand our species through that lens. It made horrible sense. We weren't random selections. We were carefully chosen representatives of human attitudes toward marine environments. So, what do they want us to do? Sarah asked. Just sit here and compare notes while they watch? As if in answer, all three of our phones buzzed simultaneously. The same message on each. Go to the harbor, Dock 7, 1 hour, bring no one else, this is necessary. We looked at each other. Dawn was just starting to break outside, the fog thinning as early light filtered through. We don't have to go, Tom said. We can refuse. And then what? I asked. They know where we live. They can contact us whenever they want. They've already been in our houses, our boats, our lives. Refusing won't make them go away. Connor's right, Sarah said. We're part of this now, whether we like it or not. Maybe if we go, if we give them what they want, they'll leave us alone. We drove to the harbor in my truck. The three of us squeezed into the cab, none of us speaking. What was there to say? We were heading into a situation we didn't understand, to meet with entities we couldn't comprehend, because the alternative was living the rest of our lives wondering what would have happened if we'd just gone to Dock 7. The harbor was quiet at this hour, most fishermen not heading out until later. The fog had lifted enough that we could see across the marina, but thick patches still hung in the air like ghosts. Dock 7 was at the far end of the harbor, used primarily for visitor moorage and transient boats. We walked down the dock slowly, our footsteps echoing on the wood. At the end of the dock, tied to the cleats, was a small inflatable boat. Nobody was in it, but there was equipment inside. Laptops, monitors, what looked like scientific instruments. Is this a joke? Tom asked. Did someone set this up? Sarah was already kneeling by the boat, examining the equipment. These are recording devices, high-end stuff, way beyond standard marine research equipment, and they're all running. She touched one of the laptop screens. It came to life, showing data streams, numbers and graphs and patterns I didn't recognize. They want us to record this, she said. Whatever's about to happen, they want documentation from our perspective. A sound cut through the morning air. Not a foghorn, not a boat engine, but something else. A low, thrumming hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The water around the dock began to glow, that same pale, yellow-white light I'd seen in the fog 4 days ago. The 3 lights rose from beneath the water, breaking the surface without creating ripples or waves. They hovered there, just inches above the dock, arranged in their perfect triangular formation. This close, I could see they weren't solid. They were made of light, yes, but light that moved, that swirled and pulsed like living plasma. Hello, Connor Blake. Hello, Sarah Williams. Hello, Thomas Morrison. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, not heard but felt, vibrating through our bones and our cells. We thank you for coming. We have questions. Who are you? Sarah asked, her voice remarkably steady given the circumstances. We are observers from elsewhere. We have many names in many languages. You may call us the collectors, as that is our function. We collect data about life on worlds across the galaxy. Your species, Your planet is one of our longest studies. How long? I asked. In your time measurement, approximately 47,000 years. We have watched your ancestors become human. We have documented your evolution, your migrations, your development of language and culture and technology. We have seen you spread across the planet and recently begin to poison it. This final phase is of particular interest. Why? Because it is unprecedented in our observations. Most species that reach your level of technology either learn to live in balance with their environment or destroy themselves within a few thousand years. You are unique in how slowly you are destroying yourselves, how much you understand about the damage, yet continue. We do not understand this behavior. It appears irrational. Tom stepped forward. So you're here to judge us? To document humanity's failure? We do not judge. We observe and record. But we seek understanding. Why do you, Connor Blake, harvest life from the ocean while knowing it is depleting? Why do you, Sarah Williams, study marine life while your studies reveal ecosystems in collapse? Why do you, Thomas Morrison, enforce conservation rules that are insufficient to prevent destruction? The question hung in the air, impossible to answer in any way that made sense. We're trying, Sarah said finally. We're flawed, but we're trying to be better. Are you? Or are you simply engaged in species-wide denial, aware of the consequences but unwilling to change behavior? We have observed this pattern in other species. It always ends the same way. Then why study us? I asked. If you already know how it ends, why keep watching? Because occasionally, rarely, a species surprises us. They reach a critical point and choose differently. They prioritize survival over comfort. They sacrifice individual desires for collective future. Your species has the capacity for this choice. We are documenting whether you will make it. The lights pulsed brighter for a moment, and I felt that pressure in my head again. That sense of being examined down to the molecular level. We have chosen you three because you represent humanity's relationship with the ocean. You harvest, you study, you protect. 3 approaches, all insufficient alone. Together, you could be the change. Will you be? What does that mean? Tom asked. It means you have been given knowledge. You know we are here. You know you are being watched. You know your planet is dying. Will you use this knowledge to change behavior, or will you return to your lives and continue the patterns that lead to extinction? That's not fair, Sarah said. We're 3 people. We can't change an entire species. All change begins with individuals. All movements begin with small groups who see clearly. You see clearly now. You know what we know. The question is, what will you do with that knowledge? Another phone buzz, all 3 of us again. This time, the message was longer. Your documentation is complete. You have been studied, cataloged, and released. You are free to share what you have learned or remain silent. Both choices are data points for our research. Choose wisely. We will be watching. The lights began to sink back into the water, descending as slowly and deliberately as they'd risen. Within moments they were gone, leaving only the faint glow beneath the surface that gradually faded to nothing. We stood there on the dock, the 3 of us, as the sun finally burned through the fog and the harbor came alive with the sounds of morning. Boats starting their engines, crews preparing for the day, the normal rhythm of a fishing community beginning another day of harvesting the ocean. What do we do now? Tom asked. Sarah was staring at the laptop screen, still recording data even though the lights were gone. We document, we share. We try to make people understand what's happening. They won't believe us, I said. Maybe not, but we have to try. That's what they're testing. whether we'll stay silent or whether we'll risk ridicule and skepticism to share what we know. We took the equipment, loaded it into my truck, drove back to my house, spent the next 6 hours going through the data, writing down everything we remembered, creating a record of what we'd experienced. The recordings showed anomalies, temperature fluctuations, electromagnetic disturbances, acoustic patterns that didn't match any known source, but nothing definitive, nothing that would convince a skeptic, just suggestive data that could be explained away by equipment malfunction or atmospheric phenomena. "It's not enough," Tom said. "This won't convince anyone." "It doesn't have to convince everyone," Sarah replied. "It just has to make some people ask questions, start conversations, plant seeds of awareness. That's how change begins." We decided to go public, not with wild claims about aliens, but with the facts. Unusual phenomena off the Mendocino coast, equipment anomalies, multiple witnesses with consistent experiences. Sarah would present it as a scientific mystery requiring further study. Tom would advocate for increased coastal monitoring. I would talk about changes in marine life behavior, the way crabs and fish seemed to sense something we couldn't detect. Maybe people would believe us. Maybe they wouldn't. But at least we'd be doing something, using the knowledge we'd been given, making the choice the collectors had presented us with. It's been 3 months now since that morning on Dock 7. We've done interviews with local news, written articles, spoken at community meetings. The response has been mixed. Some people interested, some dismissive, some hostile. The Coast Guard is conducting an official investigation into the phenomena, though they're careful to avoid the word UFO and stick to unexplained maritime incidents. I still go out fishing, still check my pots in the morning fog, and sometimes, when the conditions are right, I see them, the 3 pale lights, hovering in the distance, watching. They don't approach anymore, don't communicate. They just observe, collecting their data, documenting whether we're making different choices or following the same path toward extinction. The crabs still behave strangely sometimes, still orient themselves in the same direction, still go motionless when the lights appear. And on my boat, on the railing where I rest my hand while checking traps, there's a mark now. 3 dots in a triangle, etched into the metal like it was burned there. The mark of the observed, the mark of the documented. I don't know if what we're doing is making a difference. Don't know if sharing our story changes anything, or if we're just creating noise that will be forgotten in a week. But I keep trying, keep talking, keep hoping that somewhere someone will hear our story and make different choices. Because that's what the collectors are really studying, I think. Not just whether we'll destroy ourselves, but whether we have the capacity to change when we finally understand what's at stake. Whether knowledge can overcome denial. Whether 3 people on a dock in Mendocino can be the beginning of something larger. I don't have the answer yet. None of us do. But every morning, when I head out to check my pots, when I pass through that fog with the lighthouse beam cutting overhead, I look for them. The 3 glimmers. The watchers, the collectors of humanity's story. And sometimes, just before dawn when the fog is thickest and the ocean is calm, I see them, 3 pale lights in perfect formation, hovering over the water. Watching. Always watching. Waiting to see what we'll do next. What we'll choose. What we'll become. And I hope, God, I hope, that when they complete their study, when they file their final report about humanity's relationship with the ocean and with each other, they'll be able to write something other than the conclusion they've written about so many other species before us. I hope they'll write that we surprised them, that we chose differently, that we survived. But I don't know. None of us know. We just keep trying, keep sharing, keep hoping that somewhere in the fog, In the space between the lighthouse beams and the sound of waves against the rocks, there's still time to change the story they're writing about us. Still time to prove that Connor Blake, Sarah Williams, and Tom Morrison weren't just 3 more data points in a study of species extinction, that we were the beginning of something else, something better. We're still being watched, still being documented. The marks on my boat are permanent now, visible reminders that we're part of something larger than ourselves, part of a study that spans millennia and planets and species we can't imagine. But unlike the other subjects of their research, we know we're being watched. We've seen behind the curtain. We understand the test. And maybe, just maybe, that knowledge makes all the difference. I see the lights tonight, out beyond the breakwater. 3 pale glimmers in the Mendocino fog. Watching. Recording. Waiting for the end of our story. I hope we surprise them. I hope we surprise ourselves. I hope when the fog finally clears and the full picture becomes visible, humanity looks like something worth saving. But until then, I keep fishing, keep checking my traps, keep looking for those 3 glimmers in the fog. You ever drive a road that you've driven 100 times before, only to have it suddenly feel completely unfamiliar? Like the curves are in the wrong places, the landmarks aren't where they should be. The whole landscape has shifted just enough to make you question whether you took a wrong turn somewhere. Most people would chalk it up to tiredness, to distraction, to the way familiar things can sometimes seem strange when you're not paying attention. But what if the road actually did change? What if the landscape you thought you knew decided to become something else entirely, and you were unlucky enough to be there when it happened? I'm Elena Wardell, and I'm a wildlife photographer. Have been for the past 12 years, ever since I graduated from UC Santa Cruz with a degree in environmental studies and realized that sitting in an office would slowly kill my soul. I specialize in coastal ecosystems, tide pools, shorebirds, marine mammals, anything that lives in that transition zone between land and sea. Point Reyes National Seashore is one of my favorite locations, a place I've visited dozens of times, photographing everything from elephant seals to tule elk to the migrating gray whales that pass by every winter. The landscape there is dramatic in a way that's hard to describe if you haven't seen it. Steep cliffs dropping into the Pacific, windswept grasslands that turn golden in summer, fog that rolls in so thick you can barely see 10 feet in front of you. The Point Reyes Lighthouse sits at the very tip of the peninsula, 308 steps down from the parking area, perched on a cliff face that's been battered by wind and waves for over a century. On clear days, you can see for miles. On foggy days, which is most days, you can barely see the lighthouse itself. This story begins on October 17th, late evening, around 9:30 p.m. I'd spent the day photographing the fall migration, getting shots of shorebirds staging at Limantour Beach before their journey south. My assistant, Sienna Park, had come along to help with equipment and to learn more about wildlife photography. Sienna was 24. Fresh out of grad school, smart and enthusiastic in that way young people are before the world has worn them down. She wanted to build a career in conservation photography, and I'd agreed to mentor her for a few months. We'd lost track of time, as we often did when the light was good and the birds were cooperative. By the time we packed up our gear and headed back to the car, the sun had already set, and the fog was rolling in from the ocean in thick gray waves. The drive back to the main road would take about 40 minutes if we were lucky, longer if the fog got worse. "Should we wait it out?" Sienna asked, eyeing the fog with concern. She was from Southern California, used to clear skies and dry air, still getting accustomed to the unpredictable Northern California weather. "We'll be fine," I said. "I've driven this road in worse fog." Just takes longer, that's all. Famous last words. We got in my Subaru, a 2015 Outback that had seen better days but was reliable and had good visibility, and started the drive back. Pierce Point Road was narrow and winding, cutting through ranch land and coastal scrub, eventually connecting to Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, which would take us back to civilization. During the day, it was beautiful. At night, in the fog, it was like driving through a dream, or maybe a nightmare. The headlights only penetrated maybe 20 feet before being swallowed by the gray wall. For the first 15 minutes, everything was normal. Slow going, but normal. The road curved and dipped exactly as I remembered. The occasional reflective marker glinted in the headlights. The fog pressed against the windows like it was trying to get in. Then the birds stopped singing. I didn't notice it at first. Bird calls had been fading as evening turned to night anyway. But Sienna noticed. She was the one who pointed it out. "It's really quiet," she said, her voice uncertain. "Like really quiet. Shouldn't there be owls or something?" She was right. Point Reyes at night was usually full of sounds. Great horned owls calling, barn owls screeching, night herons croaking from the wetlands. But now, nothing. Just the hum of the engine and the whisper of fog against metal. "Maybe they're just quiet tonight," I said. But even as I spoke, I felt uneasy. In all my years photographing wildlife, I'd learned to trust the silence. When animals go quiet, it usually means a predator is near. But what predator silences an entire landscape? We kept driving. The road curved left, then right, following the contours of the coastline. I was going maybe 20 miles per hour, crawling through the fog, my hands tight on the steering wheel. That's when I saw the lights. At first, I thought it was another car. Headlights approaching from the opposite direction. Maybe another photographer or a ranger doing a late patrol. But as we rounded the next curve, I realized the lights weren't on the road. They were above it, hanging in the fog maybe 50 yards ahead, right at the horizon line where the road seemed to merge with the sky. Two lights, perfectly parallel, like headlights, but they weren't moving, just hovering there steady and bright, cutting through the fog in a way our own headlights couldn't. "Do you see that?" Sienna asked, leaning forward in her seat. "Yeah, I see it." "What is it?" "I don't know." I slowed down even more, my foot hovering over the brake. The lights stayed where they were, not getting closer, not moving away, just suspended in the fog, watching. No, that's not quite right. They weren't watching, they were waiting. I've spent enough time in the wilderness to develop instincts about these things. When a mountain lion is watching you, you can feel it, even if you can't see the animal. When you've wandered into a bear's territory, something in your body knows before your conscious mind catches up. And right now, every instinct I had was screaming that we needed to turn around, needed to get away from whatever those lights were. But the road was too narrow to turn around. No pullouts, no driveways, just road and fog, and the cliff edge dropping away to the ocean on our right. "Should we stop?" Sienna asked. "No, we keep moving. Slowly." As we crept forward, the lights seemed to respond. They began to move, gliding parallel to our path, maintaining the same distance. Not approaching, not receding, just accompanying us. And here's the thing that made my hands start to sweat. They weren't reflecting on anything. The fog should have been scattering their light, creating halos and diffusion. But these lights were sharp, clean, like they were being projected through the fog rather than existing within it. "Elena," Sienna's voice was tight with fear now. "This isn't right. What are those?" "I don't know, just get your camera out, start recording." She fumbled with her backpack, pulled out her Canon with its video capability, switched it on. The small screen illuminated her face with a pale blue glow as she aimed the camera at the lights. "Are you getting them?" I think so. But the image looks weird. They're not showing up the same way I'm seeing them." "What do you mean?" "On the screen, they're fainter, and they're pulsing, like they're in sync with something." I glanced at the camera screen. She was right. The lights that appeared steady to our eyes were flickering on the recording, pulsing in a slow, rhythmic pattern. And as I watched, I realized what the rhythm matched. Our breathing. Every time we inhaled, the lights brightened slightly. Every time we exhaled, they dimmed, like they were connected to us somehow, responding to our life signs. "Turn it off," I said suddenly. "Turn the camera off." "What? Why?" "Just do it." She powered down the camera, and the moment she did, the lights changed. They stopped pulsing, became steady again, and then they moved. Not horizontally this time, but vertically, rising slowly into the fog above us until they disappeared completely. For a moment, we just sat there in the car, engine idling, fog pressing in from all sides. "What the hell was that?" Sienna whispered. "I don't know, but I think they were reacting to the camera, to being observed." "That's impossible." "I know. But impossible or not, it had happened. The lights had changed behavior the moment we started recording them, and disappeared the moment we stopped. Like they knew, like they were aware of being documented." I put the car back in drive and continued forward. My heart was still racing, my mouth dry. The road curved again, and I expected to see familiar landmarks, the turnoff for the historic dairy ranch, the cattle guard that always made a distinctive rattling sound when you drove over it. But they weren't there. The road was wrong. It kept curving in a direction I didn't remember, kept stretching on longer than it should. We should have reached Sir Francis Drake Boulevard by now, should have seen other cars, should have passed the entrance to the visitor center. Instead, there was just more road, more fog, more silence. "Are we lost?" Sienna asked. "We can't be lost. This is the only road out. It has to connect eventually." But even as I said it, doubt crept in. How long had we been driving? 20 minutes? 30? I checked the dashboard clock. 10:47 p.m. We'd left the beach parking area at 9:30. Over an hour ago. Even going slowly, we should have reached the main road by now. I pulled over at the next wide spot. A small gravel area that might have been a maintenance turnout. Killed the engine. In the sudden silence, we could hear the ocean, that constant background roar of waves hitting rocks. But it sounded different. Closer, maybe. Or farther away, directionless. "We need to figure out where we are," I said, pulling out my phone. No signal. Not even a single bar. The GPS showed our location as a blue dot on a gray field. No roads, no landmarks, no map data. Like we'd driven off the edge of the known world. "My phone's the same," Sienna said, checking hers. "No signal, GPS not working. How's that possible? We're not that remote." She was right. Point Reyes had spotty cell coverage in places, but not complete dead zones. You could usually get at least one bar, enough to send a text, or load a basic map. "Let me check the paper map," I said, reaching for the glove compartment. I kept a detailed topographic map of Point Reyes in my car, specifically for situations like this. I spread it across the steering wheel, traced our route with my finger. Pierce Point Road, heading south, connecting to Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. Simple, direct, impossible to get wrong. Except we had gotten it wrong somehow. Or the road had gotten us wrong. "Look," Sienna said, pointing out the windshield. "Is that smoke?" I looked up. In the fog ahead, maybe 50 yards away, there was a glow. Not like the lights we'd seen before, this was warmer, orange-yellow, like firelight. Someone's out there, I said. Maybe they can help us. We got out of the car, and the cold hit immediately. It had dropped at least 20 degrees since we'd left the beach. Our breath came out in visible clouds, and the fog seemed to cling to us like wet fabric. The glow was coming from a small structure just off the road. As we got closer, I could make out details. A ranger station, or what looked like one. A small wooden building with a peaked roof. A sign out front that I couldn't quite read through the fog. Light spilled from the windows, warm and inviting. Thank God, Sienna breathed. Someone's here. But something felt wrong. That instinct again, that animal awareness of danger. The building looked right, but it also looked wrong. The proportions were slightly off. The windows a bit too large. The door not quite centered. Like someone had built it from memory rather than from blueprints. Wait, I said, grabbing Sienna's arm. Something's off about this. What do you mean? It's a ranger station. They can help us find the road. I've been to every ranger station in Point Reyes. I don't recognize this one. So? Maybe it's new. Maybe it's a seasonal station or something. She had a point. But still, that feeling persisted. The silence was too complete. The light from the windows was too steady, didn't flicker like firelight should. And now that we were closer, I could see the sign out front more clearly. It was blank, just a wooden plaque mounted on a post, no text, no symbols, nothing. A sign that pointed to nowhere and said nothing. We should go back to the car, I said. But Sienna was already walking toward the door. I'm just going to check, see if anyone's inside. We need help, Elena. We've been driving for over an hour and we're not getting anywhere. Sienna, wait. The door opened before she could knock. And the person who stood there wasn't a ranger. I say person because that's the closest word I have, but that's not quite right. They were tall, maybe 6.5 feet, and thin in a way that didn't look quite human. Their uniform was wrong too. It looked like a park ranger uniform at first glance, but the colors were slightly off, the patches in the wrong places, the fabric too smooth, too perfect, and their face. God, their face. It looked human from a distance, but up close, the proportions were wrong. Eyes a bit too large, a bit too far apart. Mouth too wide. Skin too smooth, too flawless, like plastic or wax. Can I help you? The voice was pleasant, professional, but it had that same quality as the voice I'd read about in online accounts. Too perfect. No breath sounds, no regional accent, like a recording played through a speaker. Sienna took a step back. She'd seen it too, whatever wrongness I was seeing. We're trying to get to Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, I said, keeping my voice steady. We seemed to have gotten turned around in the fog. Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, the Knot Ranger repeated. And I swear the mouth moved a fraction of a second after the words came out, like bad dubbing in a foreign film. That road is closed tonight. Closed? Why? Maintenance. You'll need to take the alternate route. What alternate route? There is no alternate route from Pierce Point. The Knot Ranger smiled. It was the worst thing I'd ever seen. Too wide, showing too many teeth, held too long without wavering. There's always an alternate route. Would you like to come inside? I can show you on a map. Every fiber of my being screamed no. But Sienna was looking at me, scared and confused, and part of my brain was still trying to rationalize this, still trying to make it make sense. We'll just head back the way we came, I said. Thank you for your help. You can't go back, the Knot Ranger said, still smiling. The road behind you is closed, too, for your safety. I grabbed Sienna's hand. We're leaving, now. We turned and started walking quickly back to the car. Behind us, I heard the Knot Ranger's voice, still pleasant, still professional. "The road opens at dawn. You should wait here. It's not safe to drive in the fog." We didn't look back. We got in the car, I started the engine, and I did what I should have done the moment I saw those lights in the fog. I turned around. The road was narrow, but there was just enough room if I was careful. A 3-point turn that became a 5-point turn, my heart hammering the whole time, expecting that not ranger to appear at the window, to tell us again that we couldn't leave, that the road was closed. But nothing happened. The building's light faded behind us as we headed back the way we'd come, and within minutes it was gone completely, swallowed by the fog. "What was that?" Sienna's voice was shaking. "That wasn't a person. That wasn't a real ranger station." "I don't know what it was, but we need to get out of here. We're going the wrong way. The parking area's back there, not—" "I don't care. We're getting off this road. We'll drive until we find something real, something that makes sense." But the road didn't want to let us go. We drove for another 30 minutes, retracing our path, looking for the familiar landmarks that would tell us we were heading back to civilization. But everything looked different. The curves were in wrong places. The reflective markers were spaced differently. Even the road surface felt different under the tires. Smoother in some places, rougher in others. And the lights kept appearing. Not the same ones. These were different. Single points of light that would hover at the roadside watching us pass. Sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, sometimes on both sides. Never getting closer, never approaching, just marking our progress. Documenting our journey through this landscape that was Point Reyes but also wasn't. Sienna was crying now, quiet tears running down her face. "This isn't real. This can't be real. We drove this road 100 times today. It's just a road. It can't change." "I know," I said, though I didn't know anything anymore. At 11:43 p.m., we rounded a curve and saw something that made me hit the brakes so hard we both lurched forward against our seatbelts. The ocean. Not off to the right where it should be, separated from the road by cliffs and scrubland. The ocean was directly in front of us, maybe 50 yards away. The road simply ended at the water's edge, like we'd driven to the end of the world. I put the car in park, killed the engine. We sat there in silence, staring at the impossible sight before us. The fog had thinned here, and we could see stars reflected in the water. But they weren't right either. The constellations were wrong, patterns I didn't recognize despite 12 years of photographing at night, of learning the sky to predict the weather. "Elena," Sienna whispered, "look at the water." The ocean wasn't moving. No waves, no ripples, no tide. Just a perfectly flat surface that reflected the strange stars above like a mirror. And beneath that mirror surface there was light. Not bright, but visible. Pale, yellow glows moving in patterns, spiraling in and around each other like some underwater ballet. "We need to get out and look," I said. "Are you insane? We need to stay in the car, lock the doors, wait for morning." "It is morning, or it should be. We've been driving for over 2 hours. We're not going anywhere by staying in the car." I got out before she could protest further. The cold was worse now, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you wonder if you'll ever be warm again. But I had to see, had to understand what was happening. I walked toward the water, my feet crunching on what should have been gravel, but sounded like something else. Like shells, maybe, or bones. When I looked down, the road surface was changing, transitioning from asphalt to something organic. Something that looked like it had grown rather than been built. The water's edge was perfectly straight, like it had been cut with a razor. Road on one side, ocean on the other, no beach, no transition. I knelt down, reached out to touch the water. "Don't!" Sienna had followed me out of the car. "Please don't touch it. What if it's dangerous?" Everything here is dangerous. At least this way we'll know something. I dipped my fingers in. The water was warm. Not cold Pacific Ocean water, but warm like bath water, like blood. And when I pulled my hand back, the water clung to my skin in a way water shouldn't, forming geometric patterns, connecting drops in straight lines and perfect angles. The lights beneath the surface began to rise. Slowly, deliberately, coming up toward where we stood. As they got closer, I could see they weren't just lights. There was structure to them, form. They were crafts of some kind, or beings, or something in between. And they were rising to meet us. "Run," I said. We ran back to the car, our feet slipping on that strange transitional surface. I fumbled with the keys, dropped them, picked them up with shaking hands. Got the door open, got us both inside, locked the doors like that would somehow help against whatever was down there in the not ocean. The lights reached the surface and kept rising. They lifted out of the water without disturbing it, without creating waves or splashes, just rose into the air, dripping that warm water that formed patterns as it fell back into the ocean. There were dozens of them, small ones, maybe 2 feet across, hovering in formation like birds. Larger ones behind them, maybe 10 feet across, pulsing with that same rhythm I'd seen in Sienna's camera footage. And one massive one at the center, so large I couldn't judge its size, its light so bright I had to look away. "The camera," I said. "Record this. Get everything." "But last time," "I know. But we need proof. We need documentation. Whatever happens to us, someone needs to see this." Sienna pulled out her camera with shaking hands, aimed it at the lights, hit record. The moment she did, all the lights pulsed in unison. One bright flash, so intense it left after images on our retinas. Then they began to move. Not toward us, but around us. The small ones came first, circling the car at a distance of maybe 20 feet, moving in perfect synchronization. The larger ones formed an outer circle, slower, more deliberate, and the massive one at the center just hovered above the water, pulsing in that same breathing rhythm. "They're studying us," Sienna said, her voice barely audible over the pounding of my own heartbeat. "That's what this is. We're being studied. How do you know?" "Because that's what I would do. If I found a new species, if I wanted to understand their behavior, I'd observe them in a controlled environment. Create conditions that would prompt responses, see how they react. You think this is all artificial? The road changing, that ranger station, the ocean appearing where it shouldn't be? I think we drove into something. A pocket, a space, I don't know. But we're not in Point Reyes anymore, not really. We're somewhere else. Somewhere they can control the environment, observe us safely." The lights began to pulse faster now, the rhythm changing from breathing pace to something quicker, heartbeat pace. And I realized she was right. They were matching our physiology, responding to our stress response, documenting how we reacted to fear. "What do we do?" I asked. "We show them we're intelligent. We show them we understand what they're doing." I watched the patterns of light moving around us, and something clicked in my mind. As a photographer, I'd spent years studying patterns in nature, the way flocks of birds move in murmuration, the way schools of fish coordinate their movements, the synchronized flashing of fireflies. What I was seeing now had that same quality of emergent behavior, collective intelligence expressing itself through individual units. "They're not separate entities," I said suddenly. "They're parts of a whole, like cells in a body or birds in a flock. The small lights, the large ones, that massive one, they're all connected. They're all one observer." Sienna looked at me, understanding dawning in her eyes. "So we're not being observed by dozens of entities. we're being observed by one consciousness expressing itself through multiple forms. Which means when we interact with any of them, we're interacting with all of them. The lights pulsed in what might have been confirmation. The rhythm changed again. Slower now, almost gentle. Like they were pleased that we'd understood something fundamental about them. "Look at the recording," Sienna said, holding up her camera screen so I could see it. "The lights on the video, they're not random. They're forming patterns, mathematical patterns. Look." She was right. On the camera screen, the lights were tracing geometric shapes in the air. Circles, triangles, spirals that followed precise mathematical ratios. The Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio. Patterns that appear throughout nature, from nautilus shells to galaxy formations. "They're showing us commonalities," I said. "Showing us that the same mathematical principles that govern life on Earth govern their existence too. We're not as different as we think. But why show us this? Why make it visible only on camera and not to our eyes? Because cameras are how we observe, how we document and study the world. They're communicating in a language we understand, the language of recorded observation. They know we trust our instruments more than our own senses." Before I could stop her, Sienna opened her door and stepped out of the car. "Sienna, no!" But she was already walking toward the lights, her camera held in front of her, still recording. The small lights broke formation, swirling around her like curious fish. She didn't run, didn't panic. Just stood there, slowly turning in a circle, letting the camera capture everything. "I know you're observing us," she said, her voice carrying across that impossible stillness. "I know we're subjects in your study, but we're not just subjects. We're intelligent beings. We understand what you're doing." The massive light pulsed once, twice. Then it began to descend, coming down from its position above the water, lowering until it was maybe 50 feet above Sienna's head. This close, I could see details I'd missed before. It wasn't a simple light, it was composed of layers, structures within structures, geometries that hurt to look at directly because they didn't quite make sense in three-dimensional space. A voice came from the light. Not through the air, not through a speaker, but directly into my mind. The same way you hear your own thoughts. "You understand observation. This is unexpected." Sienna held her ground, even though I could see her hands shaking. "We observe too. We study the natural world, document behavior, try to understand patterns. You harvest, you kill to understand. You dissect to learn. This is your method. Sometimes, but not always. Sometimes we observe without interfering. We photograph, we record, we watch from a distance. Like what you are doing now. Yes." The massive light descended slightly, and for the first time I could see structures within it. Not mechanical, not organic, but something else. Lattices of light that folded in on themselves, geometries that seemed to exist in more dimensions than I could perceive. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, like staring at a concept too large for human comprehension. "This is better. This is progress. Your species is learning." I stepped closer to Sienna, my photographer's instinct making me note details, even as my rational mind struggled to process what I was seeing. The way the light interacted with the fog, creating zones of illumination that didn't follow normal physics. The way sound seemed to bend around it, creating pockets of absolute silence adjacent to areas where I could hear the ocean amplified. "Are you learning from us?" Sienna asked. A pause. The light pulsed several times, patterns racing across its surface. I realized the patterns were data, information being processed, considered, formulated into a response we could understand. "Yes, we have observed your species for many thousands of your years. You are changing rapidly. We document these changes, try to predict outcomes. How many thousands? I asked. When did you first observe humans? Before you were fully human, when your ancestors walked upright but had not yet developed complex language. We watched you discover fire, watched you create tools, watched you spread across your world and transform it. Each generation slightly different from the previous, each century bringing changes that would have seemed impossible to the generation before. The implications of that were staggering. They'd been watching human evolution in real time, documenting every step of our development from primitive hominids to modern humans. We were their longest-running study, their most detailed observation. What outcomes? Sienna's voice was steadier now, settling into the role of scientific inquiry. What are you trying to predict? Survival or extinction? Your species is at a critical junction. The path you choose determines your future. We have seen many species reach this point. Most choose extinction. By choose extinction, you mean they destroy themselves. Destroy is imprecise. They optimize for individual survival over collective survival. They consume resources faster than resources regenerate. They alter their environment beyond their ability to adapt. They know they are doing this. They have the intelligence to understand consequences, but they do it anyway. This is the paradox we observe repeatedly. I thought about the elephant seals I'd photographed that morning, their population recovering from near extinction thanks to conservation efforts. About the gray whales that migrate past Point Reyes, slowly rebuilding their numbers. About the tide pools I documented, tracking the impact of ocean acidification on shellfish populations. We were destroying our environment, yes, but we were also trying to save it, fighting against our own destructive tendencies. Some species survive the junction, I said. You said most choose extinction. What about the others? The others develop collective awareness. They begin to see themselves as part of a system rather than as individuals competing within a system. They prioritize long-term survival over short-term gain. They become worthy of contact. Contact? Sienna's camera was still recording, capturing every word. You mean actual contact, not just observation? Yes, species that survive the junction are invited to join the larger community, to share knowledge, to participate in observation of younger species, to help us understand the patterns that determine which species survive and which do not. And you just watch? You don't help? Help is interference. Interference corrupts data. We must observe without changing what we observe. It is our purpose. Sienna lowered her camera, looked directly up at the massive light. But you are changing us. By observing us like this, by creating these encounters, you're affecting our development. That's not passive observation. Another pause, longer this time. The smaller lights had stopped their circling and now hovered motionless, as if listening to the conversation. I could feel the weight of their collective attention, that sense of being seen down to the atomic level, every thought and emotion registered and recorded. You are correct. This is a paradox we have not resolved. Our observation changes what we observe. Your awareness of our observation changes your behavior. We cannot study you without affecting you. This is the great problem of our work. Then why do it? I asked. If you can't observe without interfering, what's the point of the study? Because the alternative is isolation, each species developing alone, unaware of the larger patterns, unable to learn from those who came before. We accept the contamination of observation because the knowledge gained outweighs the interference caused. And because some species, rare species, become better because they know they are observed. They rise to meet the awareness. They become what they are capable of becoming rather than what they would have become in isolation. Is that what you hope we'll do? Become better because we know you're watching? We do not hope. Hope is an emotional response to uncertainty. We observe probabilities. We document outcomes. But if we did experience hope, yes, we would hope you become one of the rare species that survives. So what do you want from us? Why bring us here? Why show yourselves? We did not bring you here. You drove here. This place has always existed alongside your world. Most cannot see it, cannot access it, but some can. Those with awareness, those who observe carefully, you saw the lights because you were looking for them, even if you did not know you were looking. I got out of the car, walked over to stand beside Sienna. The light didn't react to my presence, just continued its slow pulsing. We weren't looking for you, I said. We were just trying to drive home. You are a photographer of life. You observe constantly. You watch for patterns, for behaviors, for moments that reveal truth. Your mind is trained to see what others miss. When we appeared, you noticed. Others have driven past and seen nothing. How many others? Many. Every night, many drive this road. Most see only fog and darkness. You saw us because you were able to see us. This makes you valuable. This makes you part of our documentation. We don't want to be part of your documentation, Sienna said. We just want to go home. Home is available. The road will open at dawn. Real dawn, not your chronological measurement. When the observation period ends, you will return to your world. The road will be as it always was. You will remember this as a strange experience, but you will not be harmed. And the recording? I gestured to Sienna's camera. What about the evidence? Evidence is permitted. We do not erase documentation, but we observe how you use it, what you do with knowledge of our existence. This is part of the study, how humans process and share information about experiences that contradict their understanding of reality. The massive light began to rise again, ascending back toward its position above the water. The smaller lights resumed their formation, preparing to leave. Thank you for your participation. You have provided valuable data about human response to controlled observation. Your species shows promise, more than most at your developmental stage. Wait, I called out. How do we know this will end? How do we know you'll let us go? You do not know. You must trust. Trust without evidence. This is also part of the study. Whether humans can accept uncertainty, can function without complete understanding. We have found that most cannot. We hope you are different. Then they were gone. Not fading gradually, not flying away, just gone. One moment the lights were there, the next they weren't. The water began to move, waves appearing from nothing, the ocean becoming ocean again. The stars overhead shifted back into familiar constellations. The air temperature rose toward normal, and behind us, the road was there, not ending at the water's edge anymore, but continuing on, curving away into the fog in a direction that suddenly looked familiar. I could see the reflective markers, properly spaced. Could see the shape of the landscape resolving into something I recognized. Is it over? Sienna asked. I think so. We got back in the car. I started the engine. It turned over immediately, no hesitation. The dashboard clock read 5:47 a.m. 6 hours had passed since we'd left the beach parking area, but it felt like days, like weeks, like we'd aged years in a single night. I drove slowly, carefully, watching for any sign that the road might change again. But it stayed solid, stayed real. 10 minutes later, we passed the entrance to the historic ranch. 5 minutes after that, we crossed the cattle guard, its rattling sound exactly as I remembered. And then we were on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, back in normal Point Reyes, back in a world that made sense. We didn't talk during the drive back to San Francisco. Didn't talk while we unloaded gear from the car. Only when we were sitting in my kitchen, coffee getting cold in front of us, dawn light filtering through the windows, did Sienna finally break the silence. No one's going to believe us. I know. We have the footage, but they'll say it's fake, that we edited it, that we made it up. Probably. She stared into her coffee cup like it held answers. I've been thinking about what they said, about humans being at a critical junction, about most species choosing extinction. Do you think they're right? I don't know, but I think about the work we do. Documenting species in decline, photographing ecosystems on the verge of collapse. We see the evidence every day. Ocean temperatures rising, coral reefs bleaching, bird populations declining. And we document it all, but documentation doesn't stop it from happening. So we're just observers too, recording the decline of our own species. Maybe, or maybe documentation is the first step toward change. You can't solve a problem you don't acknowledge exists. By observing, by recording, we create evidence. And evidence can change minds. Sienna pulled out her camera, scrolled through the footage we'd captured. Even in the kitchen, with morning sun streaming through the windows, the images were unsettling, the lights pulsing in that breathing rhythm, the geometric patterns forming and reforming, and our voices, small and uncertain, speaking with an intelligence that had observed human evolution for millennia. "What do we do with this?" she asked. I thought about that question for a long time. About the responsibility of knowledge, the burden of witnessing something most people would never see or believe. About what it meant to be part of their study, to have our response to this encounter documented and analyzed alongside responses from other species on other worlds. "We share it," I said finally. "We tell the truth, not to convince anyone, but because it's what happened. We document it the same way we document everything else in our work, honestly, completely, and let people decide for themselves. They'll think we're crazy. Maybe, but they'll also wonder, and wondering is the beginning of awareness." That's what they said. We saw them because we were able to see them. Maybe if we share our story, others will become able to see them too. Maybe that's the point. You think they wanted us to share this? That this was part of the observation? I think everything is part of the observation. Our fear, our curiosity, our decision to record what we saw, our choice to either hide or share the evidence. All of it is data. All of it tells them something about how humans process contact with non-human intelligence. Sienna was quiet for a moment, then said something that had been bothering me too. They said they've been observing us for thousands of years. That means there have been other encounters, other people who've seen them. But where are those stories? Where's the evidence? Maybe there is evidence and we just don't recognize it. Ancient myths about lights in the sky, gods descending from the heavens, beings that appear and disappear. We call them folklore now. But what if they were observations? People documenting contact in the only language and framework they had available. So, we're not the first. No. We're just the first with cameras. The first who can create evidence that persists beyond oral tradition and written accounts. Maybe that's why they let us record them. Maybe they're ready for that level of documentation. We spent the rest of that day going through the footage frame by frame, making notes, trying to capture every detail while our memories were still fresh. The way the lights moved, the patterns they formed, the exact phrasing of the thoughts that had been transmitted directly into our minds. We documented our documentation, created a record of a record, layered observations of observers observing, and as we worked, I kept thinking about what they'd said about interference and observation, about the paradox of studying something you inevitably change by studying it. As a wildlife photographer, I'd spent years trying to minimize my impact on the subjects I photographed, using long lenses to maintain distance, staying quiet and still to avoid disrupting natural behavior. But I'd always known that my presence, however minimal, changed things. The birds were aware of me. The seals noticed my camera. My observation, however careful, was still interference. But maybe that was okay. Maybe perfect observation was impossible, and the best we could do was observe as carefully and honestly as we could, acknowledging our impact even as we tried to minimize it. Maybe that's what separated ethical observation from harmful interference, awareness of our effect and conscious effort to reduce the harm we caused. The video showed the lights, though they appeared different on camera, fainter, pulsing in that breathing rhythm. The audio had captured our conversation with the massive light, though the voice sounded distorted, like it was speaking from underwater or from a great distance. We posted it online, to photography forums, wildlife observation groups, paranormal research sites. We expected mockery, accusations of fakery, demands for proof beyond what we could provide. And we got all of that. But we also got messages from others. People who'd driven Point Reyes at night and seen strange things. People who'd felt that same silence, that same sense of wrongness when the birds stopped singing. People who'd seen lights in the fog and dismissed them as reflections or atmospheric phenomena. "I always thought I imagined it," one message read. "But after seeing your video, after reading your account, I didn't imagine it. It was real. Thank you for making me feel less crazy." That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've been back to Point Reyes a dozen times. Usually during the day, photographing in normal conditions. But twice, I've driven that same route at night, in the fog, hoping and dreading to see those lights again. They haven't appeared. Not yet. But I know they're still there, still observing, still documenting humanity's progress toward whatever future we're creating. And I know that someday, maybe when I least expect it, the road will close again. The birds will go silent. Those pale lights will appear on the horizon, and I'll have another chance to participate in their study, to show them that humans can observe without destroying, can learn without dissecting, can face the unknown with curiosity instead of fear. The footage went viral in certain circles. Not mainstream media, they wouldn't touch it, but paranormal research forums, UFO investigation groups, scientific communities interested in unexplained phenomena. The responses split predictably into 3 camps: believers who saw it as proof of extraterrestrial observation, skeptics who dismissed it as elaborate fiction, and a smaller group who occupied the uncertain middle ground of, "I don't know what this is, but it's interesting." What surprised me were the messages from other witnesses. Dozens of them, from all along the California coast and beyond. People who'd driven Highway 1 at night and experienced similar phenomena. People who'd seen lights in the fog that didn't behave like normal lights. People who'd felt that same crushing silence when all the birds stopped singing at once. One message came from a retired park ranger who'd worked at Point Reyes in the 1980s. He described an encounter almost identical to ours. The road changing, the impossible geography, lights that seemed to observe rather than illuminate. He'd never reported it officially, afraid of losing his job, afraid of being labeled unstable. But he'd kept detailed notes, dated and signed, documenting every strange occurrence over his 30-year career. "There's a pattern to the observations," he wrote. Every 15 to 20 years, there's a spike in activity. More sightings, more encounters, more people experiencing phenomena they can't explain. I think they're doing periodic checks, coming back to see how we've progressed, what we've learned, whether we're getting closer to that critical junction they mentioned. I met with him, this retired ranger whose name was Douglas Smith, no relation to the Coast Guard officer who'd interviewed us. He was in his 70s now, living in a small house near Inverness, his walls covered with maps and charts tracking decades of unexplained sightings along the coast. They're not random, he said, showing me his data. The encounters cluster around specific dates, equinoxes, solstices, lunar cycles. They're using astronomical markers, points in time that are significant across cultures. Makes me think they've been doing this long enough to understand human culture, to know how we mark time and space. Did they ever speak to you? I asked. The way they spoke to us? Once, back in 1983, I was alone on night patrol checking the lighthouse grounds. The lights appeared, and I heard a voice. Not in my ears, but in my head. It said my species was being tested, that the test was ongoing and the results were uncertain, that some individuals would be given glimpses of the larger pattern, but most would never know they were being observed. Why tell some and not others? I think it's about capacity, about who can handle the knowledge without breaking down. They study us for years before making contact, I think, watching how we respond to smaller anomalies, how we process uncertainty. When they find someone who can observe carefully, who can accept the impossible without losing their grip on reality, those are the ones they speak to. Sienna and I spent hours with Douglas, going through his records, comparing notes with our own experience. The consistency was striking. Different decades, different people, but the same essential encounter. The same lights, the same silence, the same sense of being examined by an intelligence that thought in timescales far longer than human lifetimes. They said most species choose extinction, Sienna said as we were leaving. Do you think we will? Choose extinction. Douglas looked out his window at the fog rolling in from the ocean, perpetual and unchanging. I've watched this coast for 50 years, watched populations decline, ecosystems collapse, the ocean warming degree by degree, and I've also watched people fight to save it. Scientists documenting the damage, activists pushing for change, ordinary people making different choices. We're not unified in our response. Some push for change while others resist it, but we're not unified in our self-destruction either. That's not really an answer. No, it's not, because I don't know. None of us know. That's why they're still watching. The test isn't over. The junction hasn't been passed yet. We're still making choices, still determining our outcome. And maybe knowing we're being observed, knowing that our choices matter on a cosmic scale, maybe that's enough to tip the balance. Sienna still works with me. We talk about that night sometimes, usually late in the evening after a long day of photography, when we're packing up gear and the light is fading. We talk about what it means to be observed, to be studied, to be part of a long-term documentation of species development. Do you think they're right? She asked me last week. About humans being at a critical junction? About most species choosing extinction? I don't know, but I think they're giving us a choice. By observing us, by letting some of us see them, they're creating awareness, and awareness can lead to change. Or it can lead to panic and denial. That, too. But at least it's a choice. At least we're not just unconsciously stumbling toward whatever end awaits us. The footage is still online, still generating discussion and debate. Some people believe it, most don't. The scientific community has largely dismissed it as elaborate fiction or misidentified natural phenomena. But I notice more photographers are going to Point Reyes at night now. More people driving that coastal road after dark, watching for lights in the fog. Maybe that's what they wanted. More observers, more witnesses, more humans trained to see what's always been there. Building awareness gradually, carefully, without disrupting the study they've been conducting for thousands of years. I keep my camera charged now, always ready. Keep my car fueled and maintained. Because I know the road might close again at any moment. Might open into that other space where the lights wait and watch and document. And next time, if there is a next time, I won't be afraid. I'll be ready to observe, to document, to participate in their study as an equal rather than just a subject. Because that's what that night taught me. We're not just being observed. We're being given the chance to observe back, to study them as they study us, to build understanding across the vast gulf between species that evolved under different stars. The road that closed at Point Reyes showed me that the universe is stranger and more wonderful than I ever imagined. The consciousness takes forms we can barely comprehend. That observation itself is a form of communication, and awareness is a gift we're only beginning to understand. I drive that road regularly now, sometimes during the day, sometimes at night, sometimes in fog, sometimes under clear skies. And every time I watch for those lights on the horizon, those markers that tell me the road is about to change, that another observation period is beginning, because they're still watching, still documenting, still trying to understand why humans do what we do, why we harvest the ocean and study its life and try to protect what we're simultaneously destroying. And I'm watching too. Watching the lights, watching the sky, watching for the moment when the birds go silent and the road closes, and I'm invited back into that space between worlds where observation becomes participation and documentation becomes understanding. The road is still there, still winding through the coastal grasslands of Point Reyes, still normal most of the time. But sometimes, when conditions are right, when the fog is thick and the stars are strange, the road closes, and those who can see, see. Those who can hear, hear, and those who understand observation recognize what's being offered. A chance to be part of something larger than ourselves. A chance to participate in a study that spans millennia and crosses the vast distances between thinking beings.